starting to play as Batman. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51, 17th Company. Can you sink the ship? Luo Yajin lay on his back on the black bench press rack, pushing the 400kg barbell to the ceiling, sweat dripping down his tense muscles. Bench presses of more than 300 kilograms are already extraordinary for ordinary people, and the bench press of Captain America next door is about 550. Even if he is a special person, the weight of more than 400 kilograms, close to 900 pounds, is a bit exaggerated, and it is not easy for Luo Yajin. But he enjoys this feeling. The strength is mobilized to the extreme, squeezing out every bit of potential contained in the stem cells, keeping the muscles and spirit of the whole body on the edge of the limit, and every time it seems to force himself to push a little further to the other side of the limit. This can keep him in the best condition at all times, ensuring that every time he finds a bug, he can get the most home-like VIP experience from orthopedics to the crematorium. And throughout his exercise, his eyes were fixed on the photo he pasted on the ceiling. Batman. The pixels are not clear, but it is the best image quality that can be found at this stage after image processing. In fact, Agent Luo's collection is far more than just this one. The walls of his small room are covered with various Batman photos. Some of them are beating people, some are flying over eaves and walls, and most of them are even vaguely human after images that you are not even sure if they are human. If the transvestite in the photo is replaced with a JK girl, the photos in this room alone can directly convict the person and take him away. But considering that the strange bat suit in the photo is actually a muscular man weighing 1 or 200 pounds, combined with the handsome man theorem and the locker room relativity, you can't help but wonder what kind of person this stalker is. Dang. That was the crisp echo of the barbell falling on the bench press. Luo Yajin stood up, picked up the mineral water on the table next to him, unscrewed the cap, and took a big sip. The physical fitness of the special person allows his muscles to recover quickly from the state of exhaustion. During this time, he caught a glimpse of the news program being broadcast on the TV next to him. He reached out and took the remote control on the table and turned up the volume. The picture showed a female reporter. She stood in front of an apartment building, holding a microphone and reporting the situation to the camera. The eyewitness said that he saw a laughing man falling from a tall building, and then a masked man holding a shield also jumped from the building and hit the man on the head. The authorities have come forward to prove that the laughing man is a severely infected person, but they have no information about the identity of the masked man holding a shield. In addition, there is reliable information that Batman is also involved in this dispute. Luo Yajin narrowed his eyes. He moved his eyes to the photo hanging on the wall next to him, staring at the blurry figure of Batman frozen in the camera. Chu Cheng took a ride home with senior brother Felix and sneezed heavily as soon as he got off the car. He rubbed his nose, thinking about the ancient saying that sneezing is thinking, scolding, and muttering, and wondered if it might be that some neighborhood aunt saw the beautiful girl and was thinking about her handsome face again. When he opened the door and picked up his phone, he found that his good brother Wei Futang had sent him another string of unread messages, which seemed to say that he had forgotten to do the homework for tomorrow's class and asked his good brother for help. Chu Cheng replied to the message and said that he would take a picture for him after getting off the car. Unexpectedly, Wei Futang seemed to smell the scent of gossip immediately. Is your body hollowed out again? Chu Cheng was stunned. Although he was on the remote control shield stand and was on the line with a female dressed zombie ghost and a funny person, he was called to the conference room as a decoration. After eating a few bites, he was a little tired, but how could he know? But the next second, he saw a smirking I understand emoticon on the other side, and he immediately understood that this guy had thought wrong again. Just as some people like to judge others by their own meanness, LSP sees everyone as a gentleman, and women payers see everyone as having a bad stomach. Sometimes the existence of the essence of things in the objective world will also change subjectively according to the composition of the observer. It's like the joke they saw on the internet that year, asking what can fly when read forward and eat when read backward. After a lot of thinking, the two of them quickly came up with their own answers. Chu Cheng said, "That's easy. Isn't the answer just bees?" As a result, Wei looked confused and said, "What? I thought it was a level 8 gale." He ignored the guy's sarcasm. Chu Cheng went back to take a photo of the homework he had finished during class and sent it to Wei Futang. After receiving a wave of thanks from his good brother and his favorability increased, Chu Cheng quickly sat back in front of the computer. He had just left in a hurry and was called to the headquarters before he finished his meal. So when he came back, his first priority was, of course, to buy cards. Tonight, he had swiped 2 bosses again, or even if he didn't say bosses, he was at least an elite monster. In addition to the minions and wild monsters that he swiped every night during patrols, Chu Cheng now has accumulated a single draw of 10 consecutive draws and 4 draws plus 3 sea-level hero points. A total of 17 draws. Can you sync my ship with 17 consecutive draws? If I can sync with 17 consecutive draws, then I have to eat the computer screen on the spot to cheer myself up, right? Then, he almost sent people away by saying thank you for participating 10 times in a row. With 4 single draws and 3 coupons left, Chu Cheng's hand holding the mouse to draw cards began to tremble. He gradually began to feel that it was too much for this annoying card pool to not even give a guaranteed minimum, and it was all about the heartbeat. The 4 single draws gave a little more power. A burst of gorgeous and somewhat garish light effects appeared, and then a blonde beauty with a curvy figure and legs below the neck came into view. Marvel superhero, codenamed Black Widow. But it was not the well-known first-line hero Natasha Romanoff, but Natasha's sister Yelena Belova, who appeared in the independent movie Black Widow, the new generation of Black Widow after Natasha. The character description introduced that Yelena and Natasha also came from the Red Room, an organization specializing in mass production of Black Widow agents. Therefore, her physical fitness is similar to Natasha. She is not a mortal, and she is a superhuman. In short, she is probably jumping back and forth between the limit of human and below the super soldier. But she is similar to most heroes in the sea level card pool. Her overall quality is not as good as Batman. If you have to say where the advantage is, it may be blonde hair and blue eyes with a good figure. Chu Cheng now feels strange. What's wrong with this broken card pool? The first one to ship is Huntress, and then Erica, Black Cat, and Black Widow. They have no special abilities and the fabrics are more economical than each other. They are all judged by the bull, right? He now deeply realized that he was too naive to think that Marvel and DC were different from those coquettish and slutty girls who made money by exquisite half-ball exposing illustrations. These two have been playing with color since the last century. In terms of seniority, those who came later in the second dimension have to call them ancestors. Chu Cheng exchanged the last 3 coupons and took a deep breath. Can I get a hunk? Question mark? Kiuli cream. As if hearing his call, the penultimate single draw of the coupon exchange burst into a gorgeous light effect, and the red passerby with horns on his helmet appeared on the screen. Matt Murdock, the Avenger, the Fearless Man, the Devil of Hell's Kitchen, codenamed Daredevil. Chapter 52 Red Devil. The dark red demon crouched on a tall building, listening to the whole city from a high position. Jiangdu in the dark night seemed to be sleeping in a huge painting. Several different shades of black formed the main color, with the city's unique red and green light, like a stain on the painting. But in fact, he couldn't see all this, because this dark red superhero was blind. After the new hero was shipped, Chu Cheng couldn't wait to operate Daredevil to test the new hero's ability. Unlike the street heroes that were shipped before, which had the same positioning as Batman, and were not as good in all aspects, Daredevil was also a fighting street hero, but he was also a superpower. It's just that his ability is not a fighting ability, but a perception ability. Daredevil, whose real name is Matt Murdock, is a lawyer by profession, so he is called Lawyer Ma in the world. Lawyer Ma encountered an accident when he was a child and was hit by a truck full of chemical reagents. The radioactive substances spilled from the car blinded his eyes. He lost his vision, but it was a blessing in disguise. The remaining 4 senses were all upgraded to superhuman levels, and he developed a super perception named radar sense. In simple terms, this ability is that some people are StarCraft players on the surface, but they are really cheaters behind the scenes. Lawyer Ma, who has obtained radar sense, has changed to observe the world in a different way from ordinary people, and he mainly relies on super hearing. Moreover, Lawyer Ma's hearing is different from Superman's hearing, that can hear the King of Hell playing chess, but is more like sonar mapping. Although Lawyer Ma does not have Superman's cheat level hearing range that can hear any corner of the earth, what he hears can help him build a 3D model of objects and scenes in his mind. So in an abstract sense, Lawyer Ma should be seeing with his ears instead of listening like ordinary people. Because of this strange ability, walls and bunkers are useless to Lawyer Ma's senses, and the whole world is transparent in his field of vision. His hearing can draw a 3-dimensional model of several streets in his range in his mind. If necessary, he can even hear the sex positions of the male and female hosts upstairs tonight vividly. This ability is reflected in Chu Cheng's monitor. When he switches Daredevil to appear between the city areas, the entire screen turns gray. The picture effect looks a bit like the appearance of Eagle Vision in the Assassin's Creed series of games. At this time, Chu Cheng's visual experience is very similar to Batman's detective vision, but the picture information is more detailed and the sensory effect is better. First of all, the detection range is a huge leap. The detection range of a radar sense is about twice as far as Batman's detective mode. Anyone's every move within this range cannot escape Lawyer Ma's senses. In addition, there is enhanced hearing. At this time, Lawyer Ma squatted on the roof, and Chu Cheng could even hear the gossip and chat of the aunties on the street downstairs from the headphones. And this is the effect after Daredevil automatically suppresses hearing. Because if the super hearing is fully turned on, the amount of information is too large and the noise is too much, it is easy to cause nerve disorders. So Lawyer Ma has been trained, since he was a child, to help him suppress hearing and filter information. But Chu Cheng found that he could control Lawyer Ma to enhance his hearing and specify a specific direction or room for monitoring. In this case, he could hear farther and more keenly. After just a try, Chu Cheng found that this feeling was very wonderful. It was as if he had used the peripherals to replace Daredevil's first-person perspective. As he controlled the character to move, the headphones continuously sent 360-degree surround stereo sound effects. Even Aunt Lee in the barbershop was praising her handsomeness to others. But relatively speaking, the content in the game screen was limited to the range that Lawyer Ma could hear. When controlling other hero characters before, standing on a high place and looking far away, you can see the horizon, where the city and the sky meet in the distance. However, now that he is controlling Lawyer Ma, the area beyond his detection range is completely blurred and nothing can be seen clearly. Not only that, Lawyer Ma's ability to monitor extraordinary events is also more sensitive than Batman's character. Chu Cheng had just controlled him to jump on the roof for a while, and an exclamation mark popped up at the edge of the screen. According to Chu Cheng's experience, if he was controlling other heroes now, he would not be able to detect this event at this distance. So Chu Cheng immediately controlled Daredevil to rush in that direction. The Red Devil pulled out the short stick tied to his leg in the Dark Knight, raised his hand and swung it, and the rope flew out. The short stick is Daredevil's special weapon, which has a similar use to Batman's grappling gun, and can help him climb roofs and walls. Readers familiar with Daredevil know that in fact, this hero has many similarities with the signature Batman of DC Next Door, except that he has no money, no equipment, and a not so rich skill tree, and not so many cheats. In fact, Daredevil was not like this in the early days. Although Daredevil also had the background of revenge for his father's murder when he was born, even in those days, there were too many people in the household registration book and they were embarrassed to say that they were superheroes. In addition, this setting was not deeply explored by the screenwriter, so Daredevil at that time was actually just a small transparent marvel. At that time, Lawyer Ma's story and personal life were very simple. The mission of the superhero is nothing more than fighting some comic-style 18th line street thugs in strange costumes. His private life is nothing more than devoting himself to proving the universal theorem that triangle is the most stable structure with his best buddy and beautiful secretary. It is far less exciting than the later period, when he gradually developed multiplayer sports. The one who really brought changes to this character is none other than Frank Miller. who wrote the masterpieces Batman, Year One and Batman, The Dark Knight Returns. From these two masterpieces, it is not difficult to see what kind of composition this master is. So after he wrote the story of Daredevil, he also brought his favorite and best setting style from the Batman story to Lawyer Ma. So we can see many similarities between Lawyer Ma and the old master in the later generations. For example, dark and serious, bitter and vengeful, indomitable, and humanoid self-propelled artillery. Yes, Lawyer Ma even inherited this point of the old master. Although he is very poor, he is also destined to be a playboy. Lawyer Ma's girlfriends include, but are not limited to Karen Page, the beautiful secretary beside him, Typhoid Mary, the supervillain with severe schizophrenia, and Erica, the deadly assassin of the hand. Even Marvel's famous shared girlfriend Black Widow has had an affair with him. Well, this is not surprising. After all, Black Widow's ex-boyfriends are more than enough to play football together, and there are still more substitutes. With these two together, it is hard to tell who is fishing for whom. Zhang Fei stood at the dock, his hands tucked into his sleeves, and the cold wind blowing from the water made him shiver all over. Yesterday was his 18th birthday, but no one seemed to remember it. His divorced parents had already started their own new lives, and no one remembered his existence. He dropped out of high school 2 years ago, and then he lived in a daze for a while. When he came to his senses, he had already come to this path. Recently, he has been lucky. Brother Deo in the gang has taken a fancy to him and helped him. Brother Deo is a notorious ruthless person in the nearby area, and even his younger brothers are afraid of him. Zhang Fei is no exception. This was his first mission with Brother Deo, and he just wanted to finish the work step by step. Talk less and do more, not ask questions, and not want any accidents. But when the goods they were waiting for arrived, and the door of the container was opened with the sound of heavy metal chains, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. Are those people in the box? Chapter 53 Cutting the back row. The things they called goods turned out to be people, including women and children. Their expressions were stiff and dull, and their bright eyes were dull and lifeless. Zhang Fei was terrified, and he subconsciously took 2 steps back. He turned his head to look at his companion standing beside him. His companion's name was Scene, and he was one of the few buddies that Zhang Fei had a good relationship with in the gang. He was wearing a shiny black vest, a silver skull pendant around his neck, and with his tall and strong body, he looked like a guy who looked like he was wearing not easy to mess with on his face. Those are our goods. Zhang Fei couldn't help asking. Yeah. Scene blew a smoke ring and grinned at him, showing his black teeth. It will sell for a good price, right? His tone was so relaxed and casual, as if the container was filled with dead objects, just chips to trade for money. Zhang Fei felt his breathing become rapid. He felt that there was a voice in his heart that seemed to be shouting something, but he made himself try to ignore it. Don't make trouble, don't make trouble, he said to himself. He was just a small fry, a nobody. There was nothing he could do. He just wanted to complete his first mission honestly and leave a good impression on Brother Deo. He avoided the dull eyes in the container, as if those eyes burnt him painfully. Okay. Scene. He tried to find a topic to divert his attention. How many times have you done this kind of mission? I mean, cargo like this? But there was no response. Zhang Fei turned his head and found that the big guy who was standing next to him a minute ago had disappeared out of thin air. He was stunned for a few seconds, and then a huge sense of fear swept over him, as if he instinctively realized that something was wrong. Then the intercom rang. Has anyone seen where Ollie went? This is Bishiro. Brother Kang is missing too. Zhang Fei reacted and raised the intercom. This is Zhang Fei. I can't see Scene. It was not until then that everyone realized that they had lost 5 or 6 people without anyone noticing. We are being targeted. The leader, Brother Deo, made a prompt decision. Gather. Everyone gather here. Everyone immediately stopped what they were doing and gathered in the direction of the eldest brother. Zhang Fei also moved. He took 2 steps, glanced to the side, and inadvertently caught a glimpse of the people in the container again. The stiff and helpless eyes that made people feel distressed the moment their eyes met. He seemed to feel his heart was stabbed hard. The voice in his heart became louder and harder to ignore, but he still tried to ignore it and followed the order. to walk towards the eldest brother. Everyone started to move. The gangsters stopped what they were doing and moved closer. But no one noticed that on the top of a container, a red shadow was squatting on the top of the container, indifferently watching their every move. They thought that, as long as they stood together and avoided being alone and caught, they should be safe. After all, horror movies are played like this. Those who like to leave the team and run around are always the first to die. Separate actions are definitely a taboo in all kinds of horror movies. But Chu Cheng, who saw this scene behind the screen, laughed. If he stood in a dispersed position, Chu Cheng had to consider that Daredevil would be exposed to the gun line of others when attacking one of their targets. So he had to carefully plan the attack route and the order of targets. But everyone was moving in the same direction, which became a great opportunity. The Red Devil ran 2 steps, flipped sideways and jumped off the top of the container. He kicked a gangster in the head with a gorgeous mid-air kick, causing him to faint on the spot with a concussion. The man walking in front hurriedly turned his head back, and a volley of bullets swept over without even looking. But when he turned his head, Daredevil had already avoided the gun line in advance, and a volley of bullets only exploded countless sparks on the iron sheet of the container. The man hurriedly walked to his companion to check the situation, while the muzzle of the gun was always facing the direction where Daredevil retreated, with his finger on the trigger ready to fire at any time. But he never expected that the Red Devil would fly out from the opposite shadow. He was shocked and tried to turn the gun, but the alloy short stick had already hit his face from the side, making his head buzz, and he fell to the ground with a black vision. Some gangsters nearby heard the gunshots and hurriedly called out their companions' names while changing direction and rushing here. However, they didn't expect that 3 of the gangsters had just taken a few steps towards this side, and the red shadow had silently landed at the back of them and knocked the last man unconscious with a backhand stick. Because the action method is similar to Batman, although Chu Cheng was operating Daredevil for the first time, he got the hang of it very quickly. The general game awareness and operation ideas of this assassin-type hero are actually the same. To put it bluntly, it is to avoid being stubborn and go around more, cut into the back row more, and give priority to ganking the shooter. With the advantage of radar's full map perspective, he always avoided direct fire with the opponent and kept hidden in the dark. When the enemy advanced, he retreated, and when the enemy retreated, he advanced. As long as the opponent was timid, he would go to the back row to steal people. When the opponent came to catch him, he would continue to go around and around. He was just playing dirty. Of course, today we are just testing the new hero with a relatively simple daily task. Lawyer Ma is not as strong as the master in terms of strength, and his equipment is even worse. Lawyer Ma's skill specialization is police dog rather than warrior. He is suitable to be a scout. Batman is more useful in real combat. Of course, if it is just to deal with these minions, there is no difference. The number of people is constantly decreasing. At this time, only a few people, including Zhang Fei, have successfully joined the responsible Big Brother. Brother Deo's eyes are gloomy and his face is uncertain. He has a face full of flesh and earrings. His fierce appearance usually makes most people avoid him. But now he is very calm. He saw that his younger brothers probably couldn't come over, and what's worse is that they haven't even seen who the other party is yet. He guessed that it might be the Batman, or those other guys in strange costumes that have appeared recently. But no matter who it is, they can't afford to offend. After all, they are just making a living on the street, and they always pick on the weak. It's okay to bully the innocent people, but they are not on the same level as these freaks. He glanced at the container not far away and gritted his teeth. Although he felt reluctant to part with this batch of goods, as the saying goes, if you keep the green mountains, you will never worry about firewood. If you lose money, you can make it again, but if you lose people, you will lose everything. So he casually said to Zhang Fei beside him, "You, come here and drive for me. The others stay here to cover the rear." Bang. No one was mentally prepared for what happened at this time. Zhang Fei, who was named by Brother Deo, walked up to him slowly and picked up a brick. Until the end, Brother Deo didn't realize what happened. A brick hit him on the forehead, and his eyes went black, and then he saw stars and fell down with a heavy head. The others on the side were also stunned. They only vaguely remembered that this young man seemed to be a newcomer, that Brother Deo had recently promoted to his side, and no one even remembered his name. Everyone was stunned, and no one even stepped forward to stop him. Zhang Fei rode on Brother Deo, who had fallen to the ground, raised the brick in his hand, and hit him on the head, once, twice, 3 times, until the brick was soaked in blood and Brother Deo's head was smashed into a pool of meat paste, and every time the brick fell, it would splash out shocking contents, like a stone falling into a mud pit. Then they heard laughter. Zhang Fei rode on the headless body and laughed slowly. At first the sound was low, but soon it became louder and louder, until his whole body began to twitch with laughter, which was creepy. Chu Cheng quickly dealt with most of the gangsters in an area of the dock. Soon only Brother Deo, the leader, and the last few people around him were left. But when Daredevil jumped off the container and came to the dock, Chu Cheng saw a scene he had never expected. Several gangsters fell in a pool of blood, and the worst of them had his entire head covered in blood. A young man smeared the sticky blood on the corners of his mouth, like lipstick. He was holding a blood red brick in his hand. He turned his head and grinned. His weird eyes fell on Daredevil here. He laughed wildly and rushed towards Daredevil. There are a lot of people asking, so I'd better say it's not the Joker. Because the author personally doesn't like to have weird things from the Marvel DC world mixed in besides the protagonist, so the original villain will not appear. It's not an old enemy. If I must say, it's a small boss at a certain stage. Chapter 54. When Chu Cheng first saw the bodies that were knocked to the ground, he was stunned for a moment, wondering when the other side had a traitor in their own family, and he didn't know about it. He hadn't even started yet, and the other side had solved it internally. What does it mean? Do you want to swear allegiance to me? Well, of course that's impossible. Before the other side picked up a brick and rushed over, seeing the twisted smile that could be regarded as a proof of health, Chu Cheng immediately realized that he had run into an infected person again. This time, the fans were also very enthusiastic. They came up and served him with ancient artifacts, and they changed into blood-soaked battle-damaged skin versions. Chu Cheng clicked the right button of the mouse in time and saw Daredevil's body tilted to the side to avoid the powerful brick, and then took advantage of the situation to fly up with his right foot and hit the opponent's wrist with his combat boots. The young man's palm shook and the brick flew out of his hand. Daredevil went around the outside of the opponent's arm and pulled out the stick to hit the opponent's head. The alloy war stick and the skull made a dull thumping sound when they came into close contact. This would definitely kill a normal human being, but the infected person just swayed and then turned around to grab it. But Daredevil ducked and dodged, then approached and hit the other person on the head with another stick, then kicked the infected person in the chest, and the infected person was immediately knocked back by the kick and fell to the ground with a swaying body. But it was only for a moment. The infected person rolled on the ground and immediately got up again. His body was twisted like a cartilaginous animal. His mouth was exaggeratedly grinning, and the blood gushing out of the wound on his head made his whole face hideous and terrifying. Chu Cheng did not relax his vigilance. Daredevil crossed his 2 sticks in front of him, one above and one below, taking a defensive posture, ready to respond to attacks at any time. But the other party did not attack again. The infected person shook his head, took 2 steps towards Daredevil in a somewhat stiff manner, and made a move that seemed to be about to attack. Bang! Without any signs, his head exploded like a blood-stained firework. The headless corpse bent its knees and knelt down with a thud, then quickly collapsed to the ground and did not move. The infection level exceeded the upper limit of the infected body's body, and it exploded. Chu Cheng frowned. After confirming that the infected person who suddenly appeared in the pile of monsters was dead, Chu Cheng was surprised, but he still released the hostages locked in the container first. It is well known that criminals are divided into different levels. Although they are all criminals who are despised by others, some are chivalrous thieves with their own moral principles, some are poor people who are forced to take up arms, and some may be controversial heroes who have their own set of principles. But there are also a group of people who are regarded as morons even among their peers. They are the chickens who are thrown into prison and are appointed to pick up soap. Even criminals have only one word when they see this kind of stuff: cruel. Brother Deo, whose head has turned into a pool of paste, belongs to this category. So although his death was tragic enough, Chu Cheng had no sympathy for him at all. Daredevil crouched in a high place and waited for a moment. It was not until a team of agents from the 9th Special Service who had received a report on the infection their identities could be accurately identified by radar sensors arrived at the scene and ensured that all the rescued hostages were delivered to the 9th Special Service agents, that he stretched out his stick to launch the grappling hook and swung away on the rope. Chu Cheng breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that this was about it for today. He had earned a lot of points and tried new heroes. Points can never be earned enough, and it would be a waste of time to make your body weak. Daredevil landed on the top floor of a building. Chu Cheng called up the menu, and his mouse had already moved to the offline option, but in this instant he suddenly saw the exclamation mark representing the mission in the corner of the screen. For some reason, his cursor moved away from the offline button, and his sight was attracted by the exclamation mark. This feeling is like wiping the window and finding a very eye-catching stain on the shiny glass. In short, this made Chu Cheng put aside the idea of logging off. Not to mention that every task that appears on the map means that someone in reality needs help, and each task is a walking experience pack, and it is the kind of shop that you will miss if you miss it. I always feel that it is a loss to log off directly with such a big exclamation mark. Chu Cheng now feels more and more that it is really not easy to be a hero. People like Batman who can be a president during the day and fight at high intensity at night are simply monsters. He is exhausted even sitting in front of the computer for half a night every night. After that, he may be suspected by the LSP who looks at people with yellow eyes the next day that he has been working all night to get free meals. It is really too difficult for him. Daredevil's senses may not only make him have a wider detection range than other heroes, but also more sensitive to possible situations. He can not only perceive the ongoing criminal activities within the effective range, but also hear things such as plotting in a closed room and phone calls that may indicate an upcoming event. This may mean that it will be easier to complete the mission with Daredevil, and the efficiency of gaining experience may be a little higher. Chu Cheng controlled Daredevil to quickly approach the direction of the exclamation mark, and at the same time, selected that direction to use a hearing amplification. The direction came from a security patrol car, and chaotic shouting, the sound of objects colliding, and cries for help came from the car's intercom. This is the 4th branch of Jiangdu Public Security Bureau. Someone shouted desperately from the other end, "Support." Requesting support. Then there was a muffled sound like a gunshot, and the sound stopped abruptly, and there was a mix of vague laughter in the background. The patrolling sheriff immediately installed the security light on the roof of the car, and the sound of the whistle cut through the sky. The security patrol car turned around and drove towards the direction of the 4th branch of the Public Security Bureau. Chu Cheng was a little stunned. Oh my god, was the Public Security Bureau robbed? A few minutes ago, the 4th branch of Jiangdu Public Security Bureau. Director Lin sat in the office, finished his last cigarette of the day, and got up to get off work. Although it was not time yet, he promised his wife to pick up the children from school today. The children had to go to interest classes after school, and there was only an hour left for them to solve the dinner problem, so he had to leave a little earlier. As soon as Director Lin left the office, he suddenly heard a buzzing sound. Without any signs, the entire police station suddenly fell into darkness. What's going on? Is there a power outage? The sheriffs were at a loss for a few seconds, but then the backup engine started, and the slightly strange cold-toned lights came on. But before they could put their minds at ease, they soon heard someone say, "George, what do you want to do?" The sheriff named George stood by the water dispenser, turned around slowly, and a stiff and strange smile hung on his face. He slowly raised his arm, holding his pistol in his hand. Director Lin soon realized that the black muzzle of the gun was pointing in his direction. Bang! The gunshot. A flower of blood exploded on the director's chest. The intense pain was fleeting, and soon he could not feel anything, and fell on his back amid the exclamations of the crowd. After a long battle of wits and courage with the reviewer, and deleting the title, I finally managed to publish it. I never thought that a serious and pure author like me would be blocked one day. By the way, I would like to ask for a monthly ticket and a recommendation. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55 Irony. The chief has been shot. The chief has been shot. A gunshot rang out, and the 4th precinct fell into chaos in an instant. Sheriff George, who was holding a gun, laughed loudly. Everyone only saw him move his arm and start to turn the muzzle of the gun, but they didn't have time to see who the next target was. The light that had just been restored for a few seconds went out again with a buzzing sound. The next time it lit up was the fire of the gun. The fireworks from the muzzle were fleeting, illuminating the sheriff's grinning face like a flash of a flower. Another sheriff was shot, and the police station fell into darkness again. The sheriffs were in chaos. Someone pulled out his gun and pointed it at the pitch black darkness, but didn't know where to aim. They couldn't aim in the darkness, but George seemed to know the position of each of them, as if the darkness didn't hinder him at all. The crazy laughter was overwhelming, sounding like the stereo surround sound in a movie theater, and it was impossible to tell which direction it came from. Someone took out his cell phone and tried to unlock the flashlight, but just as the screen glowed, the muzzle fire illuminated the darkness again. The bullet penetrated the sheriff's body, and the fluorescent screen of the cell phone was splattered with blood, and the screen was broken. Over there, someone shouted and pulled the trigger in the direction of the gunfire. But the only response to him was a scream from another security guard, who seemed to have hit a friendly soldier. And the laughter became more rampant. Ha, good shooting. I guess it was Leoli who fired the gun. I'm not as accurate as you. Oh my god, I didn't mean to. This time it was not a gunshot, but the sound of a sharp weapon tearing flesh. The voice of the security guard named Leoli stopped abruptly in the darkness, replaced by a string of heart-pounding horror laughter. Then there was the sound of someone falling to the ground. The string of shrill screams before Leoli fell down echoed in everyone's heart like a curse. More than half of the people were scared silly, or this was as unreal as a nightmare. No one had ever imagined that they would encounter such a thing in the police station. This small police station seemed to have become a cage for each of them in the blink of an eye. They were locked up with the most brutal and terrifying monsters. What people fear most is the unknown, which is exactly the most true portrayal of the current scene. Darkness is the best breeding ground for fear. Death is everywhere, and passes by them again and again. People around them fall one after another, and each time they push the survivors one step closer to the quagmire of fear. That is something more terrifying than death. They are forced to stare into the abyss of despair, like a demon devouring everyone's spirit unscrupulously, and everyone is pushed to the edge of the dividing line between reason and madness. And it is only a matter of time before someone is pushed across that line. Go to hell. Inspector Richard fired in the direction where Brenda had just gone. The muzzle flash briefly illuminated the space again. There was no shadow of George, but a stray bullet grazed the cheek of one of his colleagues, causing another scream. Stop, Inspector. Someone shouted at him. You'll hit your own people. But he turned around and fired another shot while mumbling curses. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Come on. I'm right here. Come on. The laughter still didn't stop, as if mocking him. Someone was shot by his gun and groaned, but Richard still didn't stop. He turned his head and fired in all the directions where he thought the enemy was, as if he didn't care about accidental injuries at all. Damn it, I told you to stop. Another sheriff couldn't hold back, raised his gun, and fired in the direction of the inspector. Inspector Richard was shot in the middle and fell to the side with a look of disbelief on his face. The laughter became more intense, as if they had seen something extremely funny. The matter was indeed quite ironic. Sheriffs from the same precinct, colleagues who worked together day and night, pointed their guns at each other when facing a common enemy. George laughed heartily in the dark, but as he laughed, he seemed to suddenly realize something. He turned his head and saw a black bat that was a full head taller than him silently appearing beside him, so close that they could even hear each other's breathing. He raised his arm without thinking, and the sharp batarang had already cut him at the same moment. The sharp blade cut the flesh of his arm, and even brought out flying bone fragments. George flew back, laughing strangely. Ha, it's you. Before he finished speaking, he was hit by Batman's kick, and his body flew backwards and smashed a desk into 2 pieces. The reason why Chu Cheng changed to Batman was because he considered Batman to be the fastest among all his current heroes. The gliding cape and the grappling gun were already quite fast, but today he didn't fly here by himself. He drove the Batmobile this time. Needless to say, the performance of the Batmobiles, that even racing cars have to stand aside when it is fully powered, and it can even fly over rooftops when the jet propulsion is turned on. In the classic origin of the Batman trilogy, Batman Begins, the Batmobile was very powerful. The entire Gotham Police Department was amazed by its flying around on the roof. It was thanks to the Batmobile that Chu Cheng was able to let Batman fly across the block to the scene in such a short time. George raised his gun as soon as he fell to the ground, and the fire from the muzzle once again briefly illuminated the space. But the direction where his gun was pointing was already empty. When he stood up, Batman had appeared behind him again and grabbed his arm. But George laughed strangely, twisted his arm without caring at all, and turned around and pointed the gun at Batman's head. Batman dodged the gunshot with his head tilted, grabbed his arm, raised his knee, and knocked the pistol out, and then twisted the arm holding the gun. But the infected can't feel pain. He raised his leg and tried to kick this side. But Batman broke his leg bone with a volley kick, and then kicked George in the chest without landing. George felt a tightness in his chest and flew out after taking the strong force. When he landed, the nearby sheriffs avoided him. He didn't give up yet. He continued to smile strangely, crawling up with his broken body, as if he wanted to attack again. But before he stood up, Batman raised his hand and threw a gel bomb, which exploded under his feet. A large amount of gel expanded rapidly after contacting the air, and in a short moment it turned him into a statue. He finally stopped. This is the last appearance of the little boss and he will leave this chapter. Please vote for me and recommend me. Chapter 56 Provocation. When the lights in the 4th precinct were restored, Batman was nowhere to be found. The laughter had stopped at some point, and the infected person trapped in the sculpture had become a headless corpse, with blood still gushing out of the severed neck. After Chu Cheng controlled Batman to leave the police station, he flew to an inconspicuous place on the top of a building with the help of a grappling gun. Just when he was thinking that he should really go offline and take a rest this time, he didn't expect that an exclamation mark suddenly popped up on the side of the screen. What else? Chu Cheng was a little surprised. It was really strange. Usually, he would go out and wander around from the evening, and he might not be able to get a few orders in the whole night, and they were all ordinary tasks with little profit. As a result, not only did the tasks refresh one after another tonight, but he also encountered several laughing lunatics in a row. What does this mean? I only heard that Diddy's taxi service is at its peak during holidays and commuting, but I haven't heard that Diddy also has a peak period for beating people. Of course, this is actually a good thing for Chu Cheng. After all, the more troubles he makes, the more experience he gets, and the more points he earns. Not to mention that I ran into a lot of infected lunatics tonight. These monsters are not boss, but at least they can be considered elite monsters. The point rewards are much richer than those of ordinary hooligans. Chu Cheng hesitated. He felt like he was lying in bed reading novels in the past. He couldn't stop reading chapter after chapter, even when the day was about to dawn. He thought that this was the last chapter, but every time he turned to the end of the chapter, his hand was still very honest and continued to click on the next page. Now I think it's because that damn author always broke the end of each chapter. The feeling of turning a chapter is like you feel that you are about to come and you have taken off your pants, but when you turn to the back, oh no, there is nothing, which is very annoying. It was also Chu Cheng who was young and ignorant and had no ability. If it were today, he would have to remotely control Batman, to find him at home along the internet cable, to talk to him about life. At the very least, he would at least send him a pound of bat darts. Chu Cheng felt that he had been trained by the high-intensity tempering of the game system for so many days. Now he has become a trained person. Although he is a little tired, it is not a big problem to stay up all night occasionally. Finally, I couldn't resist the temptation of the big exclamation mark and decided to go check it out again. As a result, it really was that familiar smell again. Originally, a local gang went to a barbecue restaurant to ask for the overdue protection fee, but suddenly a laughing madman came in from outside with a knife and started hacking without saying a word. Fortunately, the Batman controlled by Chu Cheng arrived quickly and quickly dealt with the madman and settled the trouble. By the way, he also gave the bunch of protection fee collectors a good beating to ensure that they couldn't get out of bed, and another wave of new points came in. It wasn't until the sky began to turn pale that the exclamation marks finally stopped. Chu Cheng was still worried, and he controlled Batman to wander around for a while and made sure that there were no new experience packs to be brushed out, so he logged off. Chu Cheng made a lot of experience and points this night, but the situation was completely bad over at the 9th Special Service. Earlier tonight, they were a little nervous because of the suspected resurrection of the laughing infection source, and then the frontline sent various related intelligence one after another. Frontline agents were running around, constantly collecting information and summarizing data, and also dealing with sudden infections in some areas. A group of people in the mothership also didn't sleep all night, holding meetings and analyzing, while waiting for new information to be sent back from the front line. Now these people really have some PTSD. When they saw the word laugh, it was no exaggeration to say that it was just like the World Security Council in the Marvel shed next door seeing the monthly financial statements of S.H.I.E.L.D., or like the Moonlight Clan seeing the Huawei bill of the previous month every month. And the most prominent thing was that their blood pressure was full. Until dawn, the bad news was finally not as endless as before, and it seemed that the epidemic called laughter had finally stopped. The door was suddenly opened, and Professor Miyazaki ran in. From the expression and the urgency of his reaction, it was not difficult to see that he might have brought big news again. The people who had been a little relaxed were now nervous again. Someone immediately asked, again? No, there is progress in the investigation of the source of infection. Hearing this, everyone immediately perked up. The investigation of the source of infection is undoubtedly the top priority. The infected will never be eliminated. If the source cannot be locked, it will be meaningless to eliminate as many as possible. Have you found out who the source of infection is? Li Changcheng asked. No, it is not certain yet. There are only suspects. Professor Miyazaki glanced at everyone present with a complicated expression. You should all know about the attack on the Public Security Bureau earlier, right? Everyone nodded. Of course, the incident at the 4th branch of the Public Security Bureau is the worst among all the accidents tonight. This will naturally bring questions to the citizens of Jiangdu. If even the Public Security Bureau is not safe, then where else in this city is safe? We checked the surveillance around the Public Security Bureau, scanned all the targets who had entered and exited the Public Security Bureau tonight, and then matched the information with the intelligent database of the Special Service 9 Division, trying to confirm whether there were any suspected infected people entering and exiting. Then, did you find anything? Someone asked. Yes. 5 minutes ago, the analyst in charge of this work reported their findings to me, and now I will show you what I saw. While speaking, Professor Miyazaki had already connected to the big screen in the conference room. The footage from the surveillance camera of the Autonomous Public Security Bureau was projected on the big screen, but it was particularly blurry because the screen in the conference room was too large. Professor Miyazaki stepped aside and pressed the play button with the remote control. Soon everyone saw someone walking into the surveillance area and stopping for a while in the most eye-catching area of the screen. He stopped, raised his head, looked in the direction of the screen for a while, and seemed to grin. It was like a provocation. Professor Miyazaki pressed the pause button, and the picture was frozen at this frame. Now I'll enlarge the screen, he said, and the lens was enlarged several times. After clear image processing, everyone was finally able to see who it was through the blurry face. Everyone in the conference room squinted their eyes and stared at the face in the surveillance screen for a long time, and then they showed expressions of astonishment, disbelief, confusion, and suspicion. Then they all cast inquiring eyes at Professor Miyazaki. Could it be? Yes, as you can see, the facial recognition software also gave the same answer. Professor Miyazaki nodded heavily. We believe that the person who entered the 4th branch of Jiangdu Public Security Bureau earlier this evening and left this provocative video was none other than our Special Service Section 9 Agent Luo Yajin. Chapter 57 Source of Infection. The image on the screen was still, and in the enlarged image, the man was smiling at the camera lens. No one spoke for a while, and the atmosphere in the conference room seemed to become a little more solemn. "Are you sure this is a real image?" Dr. Hines said. "Video images can be synthesized, and image information is not necessarily. If it is a synthetic video, we can distinguish it. I can guarantee that the images you see are all true." Professor Miyazaki said, "The facts are as you see. Agent Luo appeared in the surveillance video. He once came to the 4th branch of Jiangdu Public Security Bureau earlier tonight and left this provocative footage that cannot but make people think. Later today, an infected person appeared in the 4th branch. Indeed. It's hard to say it's a coincidence." Dr. Hines frowned. "I remember that Agent Luo was suspended from work, right? This time, the person who spoke was a man with a fierce face. He was dressed in a suit and tie, but even in the conference room, he wore a black mask on his face, and there were several steel nails on the mask, which made his style a little weird." Director of the Operations Department, Hercules. "Yes, because of unauthorized action, an attack was launched on a casino under the jurisdiction of a certain underworld gang, and a fatal blow was dealt to the non-infected gang members. This time it was Chen Miayu who spoke. She was just listening in on the whole thing, but when the topic involved her direct subordinates, she came forward to explain. I heard that this is not the first time." Minister Hercules looked at her, and his steel spike mask made his eyes look fierce. "This is indeed the truth. Luo Yajin has a history of ignoring discipline and disobeying orders many times, and it is not the first time that he has been punished for excessive actions during the mission." Chen Miayu thought about it and said evasively, "He is a person who hates evil and sometimes uses tough measures to deal with extremists. I believe what you want to say may be lack of organization and discipline." Minister Hercules said, and paused, "But the discipline issue is not the focus today. What we are concerned about is his mental problems." "That's exactly what I want to say about this." Professor Miyazaki spoke. "I have always been very interested in Agent Luo's situation as a special person. Even among all the agents in the 9th Division, his situation is not common. As Captain Chen said, Agent Luo is a person who hates evil, which is related to his past experience. This is a good thing for a special service agent, but it may not be all good. Everything should have a limit, and it will become dangerous if it exceeds that limit. This is especially true for special service agents. The agents we need most should have a high enough infection level and strong action ability, and at the same time, have stable personal emotions, so that they are not easy to lose control. Agent Luo's situation obviously does not meet the latter. Of course, this may be because he himself does not take the rules too seriously. He does not care about the punishment or the consequences. Punishing crimes and punishing criminals is his way of getting self-satisfaction." Professor Miyazaki paused here. He temporarily cut off the enlarged surveillance picture on the screen and replaced it with a summary of the infection incidents in various places in Jiangdu tonight. "As you can see, the outbreaks of infected people tonight have something in common," he said. "First, the dock. Our first 2 agents inspected the scene and restored the original appearance of the incident. It should be a group of human traffickers unloading goods at the dock. One of them suddenly went berserk and became infected. He attacked other accomplices around him and finally blew himself up because the infection level exceeded the upper limit of his body." Professor Miyazaki pressed the remote control and the screen automatically turned to the next page. "The 4th precinct is the precinct where Agent Luo once worked. According to the intelligence we know that a small number of sheriffs in the precinct also have shady inside stories." The people in the conference room seemed to gradually follow his train of thought. There was also an incident at a barbecue restaurant. A laughing infected person suddenly attacked gang members, causing many casualties among gang members, serious injuries to the owner of the barbecue restaurant and 2 diners in the restaurant, and another person was slightly injured. If Batman hadn't arrived in time, the situation might have been much worse. "You mean, the targets of the infected people's attacks are mostly evil people?" Dr. Hines asked tentatively. Professor Miyazaki nodded. There are many other incidents, which I will not list here one by one, but these are enough to prove the point I want to make. In these incidents, although the infected people may hurt innocent people, after they go berserk, most of the targets locked on by each infected person, when they initially go berserk, are criminals. One or two separate incidents may be isolated cases, but if you continue to look through other cases, you can see that all infection incidents meet this common point. So at this point, I think everyone should have guessed the hypothesis I'm going to propose. You mean, Agent Luo Yajin of our Special Service Department the 9th of May have become an infected person? Minister Hercules said in a hoarse voice. He is using his own. He paused to think for a moment, as if looking for the right words to describe it. Point. Use your own sense of justice to infect others? Yes, you can say that. Professor Miyazaki said. Agent Luo Yajin is not a very stable special person, and his psychological evaluation report has always been relatively safe, but needs to be further observed. In addition, the behavior and target of the infected people in this series of accidents, if we exclude the innocent people affected by the infected people during the period of loss of control, are also relatively consistent with Agent Luo's usual performance. So in summary, the probability that he is the source of infection is not low. Minister Hercules knocked on the table with his knuckles. In addition to the absolute special people who are completely immune to infection, special people are not absolutely immune. Special people can be immune to the influence of the source of infection in most cases, but if they exceed their mental endurance limit, they are also at risk of becoming infected. This is why the special people in the 9th department need to undergo regular psychological evaluations. No. Professor Miyazaki interrupted him and swept everyone present with a very serious look. He pressed the remote control, turned off the archives on the screen, and the screen returned to the previous surveillance footage. In the picture, Luo Yajin was grinning towards the camera, as if mocking everyone on the other side of the camera. What I want to say is that he may not only be a source of infection, maybe he is the source of infection we have been looking for. Professor Miyazaki said solemnly. Maybe he is the source of infection who is laughing wildly. Chapter 58, Strength Enhancement. The sun rises as usual, and a new day begins again. After a refreshing sleep with the help of the capsule, Chu Cheng got up and opened the curtains. He bathed in the warm light and praised the sun as usual. At the same time, he realized that the whole morning had passed in his sleep. There is no way. Bats are nocturnal animals, and Master Wayne has not been a night owl who can stay up all night since his debut. A rich nightlife also requires a rich liver and strong kidneys to support it, and this exercise also requires a process. At the beginning of a new day, the first thing a senior game geek does is to take a shower and change clothes immediately, washing away all the stains, while also fantasizing about washing away the invisible non-key. Under the shower head, he wanted to apply shampoo 3 times and shower gel 5 times, rubbing from head to toe, and rubbing it more effective than the 10-level skin polishing young man in the TV series who has 5 faces per second. Then he rubbed his hands and sat in front of the computer. That's right, a new day starts with drawing cards. However, the majority of points have been drawn last night, and the remaining points from last night's tasks are only enough to make up a few unused single draws. However, there is a saying that life is about ritual, especially that a metaphysical expert says that the probability of getting a product with a single draw is higher than that of getting a 10-shot draw. The card drawing circle has been arguing about this point for many years, but no conclusion has been reached. If the product rate is plotted as a function curve, it must be a mountain road with 18 bends, and no one can guess where it will turn in the next second. But it never hurts to try. After all, there is an old saying that a single draw can produce a miracle. According to the law of the destined one draw of the seafood flow card drawing expert, when you only have one chance, the probability of this god draw may indeed be greater. Although it is also metaphysical, it has been tested and is effective. However, Chu Cheng found that this law does not seem to be so useful for him. In just a few shots, he drew 2 pieces of equipment. Hawk's arrows, regular arrows without high-tech arrowheads, and another special one actually drew the legendary bat shark repellent. This thing is not very useful, but it is well known among the old fans. It comes from the 1966 TV series Batman. In one episode of that version of Batman, when he was hanging on the ladder of a helicopter, a shark jumped out of the sea and bit his leg. Then Batman took out this funny bat shark repellent from his 4-dimensional belt and smeared the confused shark's face with the background music of Doraemon grabbing his crotch, which was not out of place. The joke is quite well known, but the thing is really useless. Chu Cheng estimated that he would not have the opportunity to use this thing on the shark. To be honest, it would be better to give him a bat wheelchair with nitrogen acceleration. Facts have proved that the magic draw law does not work well for him. Chu Cheng stared at the big line of "thank you for participating" left by the last single drawer on the screen and pondered for a long time, wondering if the hairstyle was not arranged properly or if he could try the whole seafood afro next time. But fortunately, he gained more than just a few single draws last night. In addition to the hero points from a few single draws, another more direct and tangible gain was that he was upgraded again. According to the routine of most games, it is easier to upgrade in the early stage and harder to upgrade in the later stage. It is estimated that the more experience is required to upgrade in the later stage. This is actually quite reasonable, because it is also the case in reality, whether it is learning or training. After all, the starting point is low when you just start, and the content you learn is generally from the shallow to the deep. If you have low emotional intelligence, it means that there is no room for decline anyway, and you will make some progress by just messing around. If you have high emotional intelligence, it means that there is an extremely huge room for improvement. Relatively speaking, the higher the level, the smaller the room for improvement, and it will naturally be more difficult to make further progress. And Chu Cheng's current situation is obviously at a stage with huge room for improvement. So now it's time for Chu Cheng's favorite quick training stage of superheroes without inner ghosts. As before, when the level is upgraded, you can randomly draw hero skills from existing superheroes. There is no need to hesitate about the object to be drawn. This is also what Chu Cheng thought of early on, and he will continue to draw Captain America. The first reason is that Captain America is a serious superpower, and he might be able to draw out some skills that will fundamentally improve his physical fitness. The second reason is that considering that Captain America's fighting skills have been drawn before, assuming that the skills will not be drawn repeatedly, the probability of drawing out superpowers should be greater. As a pure warrior, Captain America can be said to be full of treasures with combat skills, and it should not be a loss to draw most of them. There is only one painting specialty that makes Chu Cheng a little uneasy. You say that Luo Zhengli, who has thick eyebrows and big eyes, has nothing to learn to paint? What? You also have an artistic dream, and if you don't pass the exam, you will take the second exam. But don't say it. According to the law of living long, the older the experience, the more exciting it is. Just like Mr. Gyro, a financial guru in the ninja world next door who does not want to reveal his name, threw a shuriken at the first generation of Hokage from 800 miles away when he was young and ran for 3 days and 3 nights. After that, he boasted to everyone. In this Marvel universe where the war history has been completely changed, considering Captain America's age, it is not impossible to say that he and the failed art student in Vienna really had friction. I don't remember whether Captain America has Chu Cheng, but he remembers the Winter Soldier in the Marvel universe. In a certain issue of the publication, the Avengers debated whether to kill or not. Someone argued that if the furrow was in front of you, would you shoot? After hearing this, the old popsicle Winter Soldier, who had been dazed and slacking off all the time, suddenly stopped being sleepy and said, "Are you guys talking about the furrow? That's right, I killed him. What's wrong with that?" This sentence silenced the Avengers. Fortunately, Chu Cheng's right hand of God was quite powerful this time. He didn't have any weird painting expertise, and his delivery skills were quite serious. Strength Enhancement, Super Soldier Edition. In simple terms, it means obtaining the same enhanced strength as Captain America, which is more than 500 kilograms of strength in a regular bench press. This strength blessing is undoubtedly already at the monster level, except for the weird setting of ordinary people like Kingpin and Fatty in Marvel, who are said to have obtained the strength comparable to Spider-Man through exercise, which even the screenwriter himself cannot convince himself. A bench press of more than 500 kilograms is definitely at the superhuman level. However, what is obtained is only strength, not the same super soldier serum as Captain America. Or rather, if it is really the super soldier serum, it might be more likely to cause trouble. After all, serum is the representative of the abstract mutation side. It is said that it actually has side effects, or it can be said to be part of its enhancement effect. Because it not only enhances the body, but also the spirit, it can make good people better and bad people worse, and those with weak wills may not even be able to survive the mutation enhancement process. If it is really the genuine super soldier serum, Chu Cheng knows that with his otaku quality, he probably won't be able to survive it. And this mental enhancement setting is also a little disturbing. It is said that it makes good people better and bad people worse, so if LSP uses it, wouldn't it be, well, it's good to be able to directly equip skills to gain strength. After all, most of the mutations of the original superheroes are life-threatening, and the basic way to gain abilities is basically some unrepeatable self-destructive accidents. Only the Son of Destiny with the halo of the protagonist can enter the extraordinary, and others will be scattered with ashes in a few minutes. So Chu Cheng selected the power enhancement option, and equipped it directly to try the effect. Chapter 59, 3-man team. After gaining the power enhancement, Chu Cheng immediately equipped it, and also equipped the American captain's fighting skills that he had drawn before, and tried it in an open area again. This time he learned his lesson. Last time, he ignored the problem that his brain and hands often disagreed, and a spinning kick went over his head and pulled his balls. This time he had experience, so he started from the shallow to the deep, first testing his depth with small movements, and then gradually became bolder after finding that there seemed to be no problem. Just now he was still worried about whether he would have a problem with his physique not keeping up with the equipment of strength, but soon found that he was overthinking. Although only the power enhancement function of the super soldier serum was extracted, the increase in strength itself will also lead to an increase in physical strength. However, this physical strength increase is limited to the physical strength corresponding to this strength, and it does not reach the same physical fitness as the original Captain America. Captain America also gained additional physical strength enhancement from the super soldier serum, such as muscle enhancement that can embed weaker bullets in the muscles, endurance enhancement that makes gunshot wounds feel like ordinary people's scratches, and self-healing ability beyond ordinary people. Abilities like Wolverine's super speed self-healing and Wonder Man Luke Cage's skin hardening are all classified in the defense category of the skill column. This type of ability only focuses on improving physical strength and does not improve basic attributes such as physical strength and speed. However, even if Chu Cheng is only equipped with fighting skills and strength enhancement, he can be regarded as half a super soldier. In this way, even if trouble comes, he will at least have confidence. In addition, upgrading to level 3 also unlocks 2 other new functions. The first is the expansion of the number of team heroes. At level 2, at most 2 heroes, including substitutes, can be carried into battle at the same time. After the upgrade, the team has been increased to 3 people. There are more heroes that can be switched in actual combat, which means that the ability options that can be changed for different situations have also increased. In this way, including him, the Fountain Commander behind the screen, their combat team has evolved into a 3-person team, which is really gratifying. Yes, that's right, our 3-person team has 4 people, just like the 4 kings have 5 people, which is common knowledge known to everyone. The second is the unlocking of the voice function. In fact, the voice function has been available before. The hero controlled by the player sometimes spontaneously says some classic lines when the atmosphere of a specific scene is right. For example, the old man mentioned earlier said, "I'm the knight, I'm revenge, I'm Batman," and it is because of this line that people know this name. But the new function this time is different. This new function allows players to open the microphone and speak with the help of the hero. Of course, the voice of the hero is still used, so it sounds a bit like a voice changer from the screen. Although Chu Cheng does not plan to open the microphone often for the consideration of saying too much, this function can make the hero controlled by the player more spiritual in certain circumstances, more like a real person than a remote-controlled mecha. And he couldn't communicate with people or interrogate them through the hero before, but he can do it in the future. If necessary, he can also catch a poor guy to reproduce Batman's classic Bungie interrogation. I fought fiercely until dawn yesterday and felt that my body needed to slow down a little, and I was so hungry after sleeping until this point. So Chu Cheng quit the game first and went downstairs to eat his breakfast, which was a bit late for lunch. For a game geek, weekend mornings are just like his girlfriend. Laugh to death. There is no such thing. Based on the principle of having fun on weekends, whoever goes to bed first will be the grandson. The next day is usually afternoon when you close your eyes and open them again, and there is no such thing as morning at all. Chu Cheng went to the restaurant downstairs and ordered a bowl of beef noodles. Considering his current salary level, Chu Cheng even splurges today and adds 2 eggs. When scanning the code, people feel confident. Aunt Wan at the noodle shop smiled as soon as she saw Chu Cheng and added a few more slices of beef without saying a word. Chu Cheng sat down with the fragrant beef noodles, ate the steaming noodles while unlocking his phone, and clicked on the exclusive app of the special service 9aka the Madhouse on the Grave to see if there was any new news today. I thought that, since I had taken down so many infected people last night, I would have to go to the homepage anyway, but I didn't expect that an emergency notice would pop up immediately after opening the homepage. Chu Cheng squinted his eyes and looked at it for a long time, making sure that he was not mistaken, because he was sleepy. It was a wanted order edited for all agents of the 9th Special Service. The wanted person is Agent Luo Yajin. He clicked on the wanted details and the face of the handsome bald uncle immediately caught his eye. With this handsome figure and shiny head, it must be Agent Luo. The wanted information did not go into details, only saying that Agent Luo was suspected to be at risk of mutating into a source of infection and might appear in a certain area at present, and asked nearby agents to pay more attention, etc., but did not explain what happened specifically. This makes people feel a little weird. It's not that he believes that Agent Luo will not do anything. After all, they have only been on a mission together once, and if you have to count the time when he remotely controlled Batman, it can be said that they have worked together twice at most. He didn't dare to say that he really knew this person, so naturally there was no trust. However, in the few interactions, Agent Luo gave him the impression of a tough guy who was a punisher. Such people would most likely have a tough and unyielding buff. So Chu Cheng was still a little surprised when he heard the news. Chu Cheng felt a little curious, so he thought about it and decided to call Tang Li to ask about the situation. Tang Li's task was to connect communications and logistics. When she left her contact information, she said that she could ask her any questions at any time. Moreover, Luo Yajin was in the same group, so she might know something about the inside story. Tang Li did not hide it. After all, the matter was not a secret in the 9th department. She directly explained the general ins and outs to Chu Cheng. In short, there were a lot of infected people who were causing trouble last night. As a result, Agent Luo seemed to have gone to the surveillance video of the 4th branch of the Public Security Bureau to punch in. Not long after the incident, the Public Security Bureau exploded. The deans of the mental hospital in the Grave held a meeting overnight to discuss, and the result was that they suspected that Agent Luo might have fallen ill. So they immediately arranged for the agents to invite the people to the base to explain the situation. However, they were not placed in the Flying Tomb, but in the branch of the 9th Special Service Department established in Jiangdu. Of course, it is impossible for the Special Service Department to stuff all its belongings into the floating tomb. They also had branch bases in major cities. For example, the one in Jiangdu was disguised as the headquarters of a trading company in a remote suburb. But don't look at it as an ordinary trading company, but as a special service department. It is actually impregnable, and not even a mosquito can get in and out. Well, it seems to be so. But then Chu Cheng heard Tang Li say that Agent Luo was invited to the branch base to inquire about the situation this morning. But the inquiring agent had just explained his purpose and had no time to ask anything, and Agent Luo suddenly rushed out of the door, broke through the siege, and left the branch base alone, and his whereabouts are currently unknown. Chu Cheng was silent. So a person without support and logistics suddenly slipped away from the building full of agents, and now he can't be found. This makes people doubt the composition of their security system and makes Chu Cheng more worried about the fate of the flying thing in the sky. But thinking from another angle, it seems that they can't be blamed. People imagine that the bodyguards and agents of the confidential department should be vigilant and alert, and their security network should be tight and leak-proof. But logic is very abstract. It's like the leader of the Tekkadan was assassinated in the street and shot 3 times. Its unreasonable performance made the screenwriter and his family nailed to the pillar of shame and repeatedly questioned. But if it is in reality, you may not even need a team or a plan, just one person and a gun, and you can even walk in front of the Prime Minister to create history. It's hard to say which is more magical, fantasy or reality. However, this story not only made Chu Cheng further doubt the security and reliability of the Special Service Lunatic Asylum, but also made him feel a little weird. If it was just based on that surveillance video, it might not have explained anything, but Luo Yajin's sudden escape made things even more suspicious. Could it be that he was really infected? Chapter 60 Jiangdu Branch. In fact, whether Agent Luo is the source of infection is still under investigation. Headquarters has not concluded. Initially, they only questioned him to understand the situation, but did not order his arrest. Tang Li said, but Agent Luo's radical behavior escalated the situation. It still sounds outrageous. Chu Cheng thought to himself, but continued to ask, so, just because he was captured on camera, the headquarters suspected that he was the source of infection? This is the main reason, but it may not be just this. Tang Li lowered his voice on the other end of the phone. This is what I heard, but it may not be true. It seems that some people say that the attack on the 4th branch of Jiangdu Public Security Bureau is also a suspicious point. She thought for a while and asked in a low voice, do you know that Agent Luo was a sheriff before joining the 9th Bureau? I know. Chu Cheng said, he mentioned it to me. I also saw old photos in his office. Then do you know which police station and branch Agent Luo belonged to when he was a sheriff? I don't know. Chu Cheng asked in surprise, you don't mean to say? Yes, it was the 4th branch. Tang Li said, so it's natural that people would associate it, right? And I heard that he had a feud with someone in the 4th branch. What kind of feud? I don't know about that. These parts are encrypted personal information and can only be viewed by leaders with corresponding access rights. But these have little to do with you. If you see Agent Luo, please contact the headquarters immediately and someone will deal with it. She was right. Chu Cheng and Agent Luo were not very familiar with each other. Whether the other party was infected or caught by the organization had little to do with him. If it were in the past, he would definitely not even ask about such trivial matters and would stay as far away as possible. But now it is different. Now he has developed a new hobby, that is, meddling in other people's business. After all, he is now the legendary keyboard warrior who will roar when he sees injustice, and he will not bother with trivial matters. With a shout of keys coming, he will hold the keyboard and start typing. Anyway, keyboard warriors are fearless. Chu Cheng feels that he has smelled the smell of something big and feels that he has stirred up this muddy water. He is very interested in the clues that Tang Li just mentioned. Chu Cheng was also at the scene of the accident at the 4th precinct last night as Batman. But he didn't expect that this was actually the place where Agent Luo had stayed before. It seems that specific information requires higher access rights, which Chu Cheng obviously does not have. But it doesn't matter. As the saying goes, we boys want to get what we want, and there are few things that the master wants that he can't get, except for his parents. After a while, Batman has arrived outside the building of the Secret Service 9th Division, which is disguised as a trading company. According to the old rules, he still waits and surveys before taking action. Although it is said that the security of the mental hospital on the Grave is questionable, it is such a large organization after all, and no matter how effective it is, its security capabilities cannot really match those of a public toilet. Batman observed the building several times and scanned the entire building with the detective mode function and basically built a complete model in Chu Cheng's mind. First of all, it is dangerous to touch the building from the outside. The glass on the outside of the building is covered with the most advanced motion sensors. Even a cat scratching the glass will cause an internal alarm and expose the whereabouts instantly. Fortunately, the omnipotent detective mode has marked the location of the sensor in advance. And through the perspective of the detective mode, Chu Cheng can see through the wall to see the wiring arrangement of the sensors in the wall of the building, and follow the intricate lines like a spider web, to find the control hub. Then it will be easy to deal with it next. Chu Cheng used the number keys to switch equipment, and Batman immediately changed to his powerful universal decoder. After locking the control hub, Batman held the decoder and operated it in a way that Chu Cheng's current knowledge level could not understand, and the sensors in a large area were immediately scrapped. The whole process took only a few seconds. Chu Cheng could imagine that, if the software experts of the 9th department heard about this, they would probably be blinded by their 24K titanium alloy eyes, and then they would have a fundamental shaken in their knowledge and even the worldview they had built up in their lives so far. But it was not their fault. After all, Batman showed his power and hacked the system of Apocalypse, the home planet of the Dark Lord Darkseid. He also hijacked the biological weapons arsenal of Apocalypse and threatened Uncle Dan in turn, shocking Superman for a whole year. So it was not that they were too bad, but the opponent had a hacker. If they really wanted to compete with Batman in hacking, the entire department of the lunatic asylum would go crazy. After disabling the sensor, Batman used the grappling gun to parachute to the floor that Chu Cheng had observed in advance. The perspective of the detective mode ensured that there was no one on the corresponding floor. The universal decoder dealt with the surveillance video and the electric lock, and Batman successfully sneaked in. It was even easier to enter the floor. Sneaking in detective mode is just like playing hide and seek with a god's perspective. Chu Cheng can see clearly how many people are behind which wall and where they are going. The universal decoder can handle every surveillance video that cannot be avoided along the way. Chu Cheng can not only simply paralyze it, but also intercept any surveillance video clip stored in the corresponding device and play that clip repeatedly as a real-time video, so that the illusion that no one is on the corresponding road section can be left. In addition, the decoder can also handle all electronically controlled door locks, and the master key in Batman's belt and his lock-picking skills can handle the remaining locks. If there are still agents or security guards who cannot be avoided, then ask them to take a nap in a friendly manner. When he wakes up, Chu Cheng's side should be almost done. More than 10 minutes later, Batman has arrived at the location of the sub-base server. There are still 2 agents sleeping soundly in the room. Batman's infiltration is so plain and boring. Chu Cheng selected the equipment, and Wayne on the screen took out his beloved little decoder again. However, this time he did not use wireless transmission, but took out a data cable and plugged it directly into the server host. Chu Cheng estimated that it might be more difficult to decipher this host. Although he did not understand the specific process, he only saw that Batman on the screen spent a little longer tinkering with his black technology gadget than before. Of course, from Chu Cheng's perspective, there was actually not much difference. The workflow from his perspective was roughly equivalent to finding the target, holding down the E key, waiting for the bar to read, and finally saying the bomb has been defused when the job was done. The world famous painting court is defusing the bomb. This firewall actually blocked Batman for more than a minute. Chu Cheng felt that it could have been blown for a year. Successfully connected to the system, Chu Cheng clicked on the device in Batman's hand, and the device screen immediately enlarged, occupying almost the entire computer screen on Chu Cheng's side. He can operate the decoding device like operating his own computer. Chu Cheng is a complete novice in programming. He was worried that, if the threshold for operating the decoding device required him to input hello world in C language, he might fail. But fortunately, perhaps considering the situation, that the player is a programming muggle, the operation of Batman's decoder after decoding is also foolproof. Basically, just treat it as Beidou, and you can get whatever you ask. Chu Cheng directly entered Luo Yajin's name, and a lot of information popped up quickly. The opening was lightning, and before Chu Cheng had time to read the other content, his eyes were immediately attracted by one of them. He saw the photo of Agent Luo Yajin. He doesn't look much different from now, especially the still sparse hair. It is estimated that it is only a photo of recent years, but it clearly says death certificate. ? Please give me a monthly ticket and a recommendation ticket. Chapter 61 Luo Xian. Death certificate? Chu Cheng's eyes widened, and he looked at the clear photo again. He confirmed again and again that this was indeed the agent Luo Yajin he knew, and that the death certificate was genuine, and then he couldn't help but fall into confusion. If the person was dead, then who was the same tough guy who took him out to chat with the Punisher before? Is the corpse talking? But he soon noticed that the name on the death certificate was not Luo Yajin, but Luo Xian. Naturally, Chu Cheng quickly thought that it might be Agent Luo's twin brother, but after checking other documents, he soon found out that it was not. This is Agent Luo, or his past self. When he was a sheriff, his name was Luo Xian, but this identity had been dead for a while. The only one who was reborn was today's Luo Yajin, the special agent of the 9th Special Service. The specific events during the period were also recorded in detail and sealed in the archives, and only internal personnel with relevant permissions could access them. Of course, it does not apply to Batman. The decoder easily solved the encryption, and all the electronic files appeared one by one, like a virtual data scroll that was spread out in full view, silently telling a dusty story. This is a story about a sheriff. When he was first transferred to this city, Luo Xian was still full of ambition and fantasized that he would do something big. He and his colleagues would go through fire and water, fight deadly and dangerous element, and take down the drug lord who had a hand over the sky, just like what is often played in movies. But the reason why a movie is that it always gives the audience an explanation before the progress bar ends. The bad guys will be subdued by the sheriff, just like light always illuminates all the dark corners. At first he really believed it so naively, and he had hope for his future work. But his assigned partner didn't think so. The partner was an old security guard named Brooke, who had been in this position for 20 years. He was a standard old-timer. When he first met Luo Xian, his favorite phrase was "mind your own business." But in Luo Xian's opinion, he didn't even manage his own affairs well. The old sheriff turned a blind eye to almost everything. He didn't seek progress or achievement. His greatest ideal in life was to spend the rest of his life in this unchanging position and retire home safely. This was undoubtedly in conflict with Luo Xian's philosophy, so they always didn't get along and had different views on almost everything. He originally thought that they would slowly get along and become more accepting of each other over time, but they didn't. In fact, their partnership lasted for many years, and they still couldn't understand each other. The old sheriff always arranged for him to do some meaningless chores and some hard work that other old hands didn't like to do. In fact, Luo Xian looked down on him deep in his heart. He felt that Brooke was far from the tall image of the sheriff in his mind. He labeled the old guy as a coward and felt that he was not the kind of person who would devote himself to a lofty goal. Until the last month before retirement, when Brooke Sr. blocked a bullet for his partner, he fell forever at the finish line of his lifelong pursuit. If there is any important turning point in Luo Xian's life, this is undoubtedly the first one. It was his fault. In fact, it was not even their case. An 8-year-old girl disappeared, and her parents went to the police station in despair to report the case. Sheriff Tengu was in charge of the case, but his investigation had made no progress. Luo Xian felt that Tengu was a guy who was more likely to cause trouble than to achieve success. He had no ability and no faith. Every minute and every second he wasted was precious to the girl and her parents. He could not stand by and watch. So he tried his best to persuade Brooke to intervene in the case with him, vowing to save the child. At first, Brooke Sr. disagreed as always. His lifelong goal was to retire peacefully, never make enemies, and never cause trouble. Seeing that there was only 1 month left to achieve this goal, he had no reason to attract trouble that did not belong to him. That child was only 8 years old. Luo Xian stared at his partner's old eyes with his burning gaze and said word by word, "Imagine if that was your daughter, would you still stand by and watch?" The old sheriff was persuaded. Their partnership was surprisingly smooth, and they soon found the whereabouts of the girl and the kidnapper. But they were a step behind. They were ambushed. Somehow, the other party seemed to know about their actions tonight in advance. The kidnapper and his companions ambushed the two of them in return, and they were caught off guard. With the help of reinforcement that arrived later, the criminals were subdued. The girl was successfully rescued, and one person died in the process. That was the old sheriff who had only 1 month left in his term. When cleaning up the scene, Elyosian was unexpectedly calm. He was not angry, not sad, and so calm that even those who tried to comfort him were at a loss. He refused the director's kindness to let him take a vacation to recuperate, and only made one request, that he had a few questions to ask the kidnapper. The director agreed. This was a right he had earned. But no one would have thought at that time that Elyosian broke the kidnapper's neck in the interrogation room. This act made him lose his uniform and his job, thanks to the chief's protection. They said to the outside world that the criminals attacked the police, otherwise the matter could have been even uglier. But Elyosian's reaction to this was also very calm, as if he didn't care about it. A few days later, he found an underground bar. It was a bar in a grey area, owned by a big man who had a lot of power in the city's underground world. Many people knew that he had shady dealings under his name, but there was no evidence, and perhaps no one asked. When Elyosian found Sheriff Tengu in the bar, the old guy was playing dice with a pair of bunny girls. He was a little surprised when he saw Elyosian. "Hey, why are you here?" But Tengu didn't ask any more questions soon, but stood up and smiled and put his arm around his shoulders, as enthusiastic as a good brother who hadn't seen each other for many years. Now that you're here, you have to have fun. This place is simply heaven. If it's your first time here, then you found the right person. I can take you." But Elyosian was not interested in his endless nonsense and said bluntly, "On the day when Brooke and I took action, someone leaked the news. It could only be someone inside the sheriff's office." Tengu's movements froze for a moment. "So what? Is it you?" Elyosian looked at him coldly, his eyes like a sharp knife. He might have thought that Tengu would at least try to defend himself, but he didn't. The old sheriff laughed. "So what? Why?" Elyosian asked calmly. "No reason." Tengu sat back in his seat, drank a sip of wine slowly, and then stretched out his arms to hug a bunny girl. "Because no one dares to interfere in my business." Tengu snorted. "I just can't stand the face of you, an excellent graduate. What do you want to prove? Prove that you are better than me? Ha. I'm just telling you that you are a joke. It's your luck that old man took the bullet for you this time. Take it as a lesson. If you dare to provoke me, you won't be so lucky next time." Elyosian was silent for 2 seconds. "How about I go talk to the director about this?" "Director? Why don't you sit down and have a drink?" Tengu laughed. "We just talked on the phone. The director is on his way to have a drink with me, and I have already booked his bunny girl for him. Why don't you try it? How about this?" Elyosian gently closed his eyes. "You know, you are right. I'm a joke. Brooke has been telling me so. He has been trying to teach me, but I always turn a deaf ear to him. It's okay, young people. It's normal to make mistakes." Tengu began to scold in the tone of an elder. "You young people nowadays just like to think things are too simple." "Really? I think sometimes you make things too complicated." Elyosian opened his eyes, and when he raised his head, an exaggerated smile that made people a little creepy was already on the corner of his mouth. "Now, I want to make it simple again." He took out a pistol and pointed the black muzzle at Tengu's head. Tengu was shocked. "Isn't your gun already?" At this time, other people in the store were also alarmed by the movement here. A security guard in a black suit began to approach this side. "Are you crazy?" Tengu was a little flustered. He said in a deep voice, "Do you know where this is? Do you know what the consequences will be if you use a gun here?" "I don't know." Elyosian smiled and said slowly in the most indifferent voice, "But we will know soon. Gunshots. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62, the world's #1 detective. According to the archives, no one survived that night in that bar, not even the owner of the bar. Facts have proved that, even if he is a big boss who occupies half of the Jiangdu underground world, and is rumored to be able to cover the sky with one hand, his life is only worth a bullet, no different from other people. The door of the bar opened for the last time, and Luo Xian, covered in blood, walked out slowly, like a sheriff from hell. There were about 7 or 8 bullet holes on his body, some of which were still bleeding, but he didn't care. He seemed to have no idea where to go for a while, or maybe he was a little tired, so he sat on the sidewalk outside the bar, blowing the cold night wind, and lighting a cigarette. The archives show that he was already infected at that time. However, the author of the report also mentioned in the archives that it is speculated that Luo Xian himself should not have noticed this at the time. That night, he may not have thought about coming out of the bar alive at first, and he may just want to die in a proper place and find a suitable grave for himself. It may be for this reason that the author added a line in the subject's mental evaluation. There may be a tendency to self-destruction. Later that night, Luo Xian met the agent of the Special Service Lunatic Asylum. After passing the physical and mental assessment, he officially joined the Lunatic Asylum family. It was after that he changed his identity. Luo Xian of the Public Security Bureau died that night, and he was reborn as Luo Yajin of the Special Service 9th Division. Chu Cheng looked up the records of the specific file changes in this process, and concluded that it might be similar to the famous witness protection program in a certain country in the previous life. The general meaning is to erase everything in the past for the witness, change a new name and identity to a new place, to start a new life. It's just that this plan may be really effective in reality, but it's not the case in those ugly American blockbusters that don't feel comfortable if they don't slander their own government for a day. In the movie, you can see that the well-known characters who joined the witness protection program always seem to be unable to escape the fate of being found by the past. From the name of this plan, it feels a bit like Iron Man's anti-20th armor. As we all know, anti-20th armor often resists loneliness, and the highlight of the witness protection program is still that what have you protected point JPG. It's hard to say what happened to Luo Yajin for now. Judging from the video footage of the 4th precinct, this incident might have something to do with his past. But no matter what, he still has to find him first. After getting the information he wanted from the server, Chu Cheng disconnected the connection for the time being. But before leaving the building, he wanted to go to another place. Agent Luo Yajin escaped from this building earlier today. Just when Chu Cheng was scanning the building structure in detective mode from the outside, he found a crack in the glass on the outside of the 3rd floor. It was obvious that Agent Luo jumped from that place. Chu Cheng waited patiently until the security guard who was patrolling the scene of the jump from the window on the 3rd floor left, and then he controlled Batman to get in through the broken window. At this time, a cordon had been set up outside the room, and the scene was blocked. There were scattered glass fragments on the carpet, and the air was a little humid. With a tried-out mentality, Chu Cheng entered the reconnaissance scanning state of Batman's first-person perspective. He aimed the scanning box in the center of the field of view at the debris on the ground, and pressed the right button of the mouse to try to scan. This is another special ability of Batman, which is on-site investigation. This is also an ability that has appeared in the Arkham series. Batman's detective vision contains the word detective, so it is naturally distinguished from the spider sense, eagle eye mode and beast smell of his colleagues in other games. Batman's story originally originated from Detective Comics, and he himself has the title of the strongest detective in the DC world, so the detective element are also intentionally restored in the comic adapted game. However, the Batman game is essentially an action game, or a superhero action game with fantasy characteristics, so the detective element mixed in it are like the action element mixed in the detective-themed work Detective Conan, which has a bit of metaphysical blessing. But it is a bit different from the scientific reasoning next door, where the truth is completely supplemented by the brain. In the reasoning part of the game, the master is more like a combination of the great detective Sherlock Holmes and the technology dog Tony Stark, looking like a god's perspective covered with technology and reasoning. For example, at this moment, after Chu Cheng scanned the scattered glass pieces on the ground, the model of the room and glass was quickly built in the first-person display inside Batman's helmet. In just a few seconds, the screen had played back the scene before the glass was broken. From Batman's first-person perspective, he could see the holographic model of Agent Luo Yajin rushing into the room from the door, firing 2 shots at the window, leaving 2 holes, and then crashing out with a clang. The whole process was vivid in Batman's vision, just as if he had experienced it personally at the scene. There was even a progress bar at the bottom of the screen. As Chu Cheng dragged the progress bar with the mouse, the whole scene could be fast-forwarded, reversed, or paused at any time. He could see all the details of the whole process. This kind of on-site investigation ability of directly looking back and replaying shocked Chu Cheng in the Arkham game back then. If you say this is an investigation and reasoning, it seems to be a bit beyond that scope. Its degree of rebellion is actually a bit like the legendary magical power clairvoyance. But if you say he is not, he seems to be quite particular. In Iron Man 3, Stark used a similar method of scanning the crime scene holographic modeling to conduct high-tech on-site investigation. The great detective Sherlock Holmes even has the ability to infer Niagara Falls from a drop of water. It is not impossible for Batman, who has both top detective ability and super black technology, to have this ability. So the holographic replay of the crime scene that the player sees may not be completely a restoration of black technology, but maybe a combination of the model built in Batman's mind after the on-site investigation and his high-tech equipment, presented to the player in the simplest and most intuitive God's perspective projection mode. Therefore, the player can play a super detective with a foolproof operation. Batman jumped out of the window, opened his cape, and landed near the falling point. Although the glass left on the ground after Luo Yajin jumped down had been cleaned up, the detective mode scan can still restore the image of his fall. The floor tiles were slightly cracked under the bombardment of his fall, and Batman's first-person perspective could even see traces of blood reaction on the ground. Luminal reaction is a knowledge often used in criminal investigation. Whether the blood stains at the crime scene have been wiped or washed, the luminal reaction can be used to see the blue fluorescence at the location where the blood was splashed. This was originally a trick used in conventional criminal investigation, and generally speaking, the glow of the blood stains detected will only last for about 30 seconds, and the surrounding environment cannot be too bright. But it is different when it comes to Batman. When he turns on the detective mode, a new function in the helmet is activated, which makes Chu Cheng I don't understand, but I'm shocked. So the fluorescent reaction left by the dried blood can be seen everywhere, extending all the way to the direction of the parking lot. So sometimes Chu Cheng really thinks that infrared imaging and night vision are just disguises. To put it bluntly, the visual sensor technology in the old man's helmet is actually a black sheep wall. Technology is just a disguise. Roker's exchange law proposes that whenever objects come into contact, there will be a transfer phenomenon. Most people think that, as long as they wear gloves to isolate fingerprints, everything will be fine, based on the impression left by movies and TV dramas. But this is not the case. Traceology believes that wherever a person walks, there will be traces left. This refers not only to fingerprints and silver, but also to the suspect's hair left at the scene, traces left by tools, scraped paint, body fluids left, and even fibers of clothing. The various functions of Batman's detective mode are built on this theory. The fluorescent reaction is getting less and less when we get to the parking lot. Chu Cheng guessed that it should be because when Luo Yajin walked here, his body had almost healed, and he had stopped bleeding. But Batman still successfully traced it to an empty parking space. It is very likely that the car originally parked in that position was the vehicle that Agent Luo drove away. This time, the parking space was scanned again using the detective mode, but unexpectedly, the detective vision of the master, which seemed to have opened a cheat code, hit a wall. The detective vision cannot scan tire marks. Batman's voice sounded, but that should be a psychological activity for the players to hear. This surprised Chu Cheng a little. He had already accepted Batman's perspective of writing detectives and reading scripts, but now he didn't expect that there would be clues that even his cheats couldn't handle. But then he heard Batman continue. I need the Batmobile scanner for further tracking. Chu Cheng. This. Breaking into someone's base to steal intelligence is fine, but driving the tank like Batmobile directly into someone's parking lot, isn't that a bad idea? If no one noticed, then they really have the same security team as Arkham. Chapter 63 Simulation Tracking. When Chu Cheng heard Batman's opinion, which was similar to that of a game guide, he couldn't help but fall into deep thought. He even wondered if the master had dealt with the security guards of Arkham too much and had integrated into the segment. His Batmobile was like a tank with 2 wings, which was literally powerful. Would it be appropriate to drive such a big thing directly into the parking lot for on-site investigation? The security guards of the asylum only had poor eyesight and were not plankton. It was a bit absurd that such a thing could be transported in, right? Chu Cheng's first thought about this idea was to try it and die, thinking that it must be a ghost if such a big thing was driven in without anyone noticing. But on second thought, he thought that it seemed okay to try it. If he was exposed, he could just rush out in a Batank, which Batman did a lot in the original work. The master was still very good at catching street thieves, and he had never failed to escape from the Gotham Police Department for decades. At worst, he could still go offline and escape. At the end of the game, Batman and his equipment disappeared on the spot, and he could also show off to the pursuers. The other reason is the same old one. What does it have to do with me, Chu? If Batman is doing something outside? Anyway, it's not me who is hanging around outside, so it's not a big deal if I teeter on the edge of death. Just like in the comics and the Arkham Knight game, the Batmobile can also be controlled remotely. Through the remote control device, Chu Cheng can switch to the perspective of the unmanned Batmobile and drive it to this underground parking lot. Although it seems a bit difficult to sneak into this big guy, it is Batman's equipment after all, so it is not impossible to operate. First of all, Batman, who has already sneaked into the parking lot, has fixed the surveillance equipment in the parking lot to ensure that no one will take pictures of the Batmobile. Then the Batmobile turned on the stealth mode throughout the whole process to avoid being seen. This invisibility does not refer to the chameleon-like escape like LAN linking, but like the Batmobile in the movie Batman Begins, the engine noise is reduced to the minimum, all lights are turned off, the tail thruster is closed, and the black painted chariot will completely disappear and blend into the dark environment. The built-in artificial intelligence will automatically avoid the lights and plan the route to move in the shadows. This trick is not useful in the downtown area, where the whole street is brightly lit, but it becomes sharper in remote sections and suburbs. And now this branch of the Secret Service insane asylum, which is disguised as a trade building, may be located in the suburbs for the purpose of concealing its presence. In this section of the road, the Batmobile immediately turned into a ghost in the dark, silent and ghostly, and it would be difficult to detect, even if it drove through the surveillance camera. After a field survey, Chu Cheng found that the only thing that could not be bypassed was the sentry at the door. Under the light bulb in the parking lot that flashed brighter than the singles on a date, even if the Batmobile in stealth mode drove past here, if it could not be seen, then the security guard must have been a professional referee who had a good life in his previous life. But it was not a big problem if it could not be avoided. Chu Cheng directly manipulated Batman's knees to walk silently and approached, using physical hypnosis to send the security guard a sweet dream. After dealing with 3 sentries in total, the Batmobile was actually driven in by him without anyone noticing. Then Batman got on the Batmobile and started the scanning device on the chariot and conducted a deep scan of the traces on the parking space. You don't know if you don't scan it, but you can see a bright blue scanning beam from the front of the chariot rolling out like a wave, and 4 clearly visible wheel marks suddenly appeared on the parking space. And then this is not over yet. The scanning and analysis continued after the wheel marks appeared. Chu Cheng guessed that Batman might have calculated the volume through the wheel spacing, or matched the car model according to the wheel model. After the scan, a virtual model began to be gradually built above the tire marks under the detective's vision. First, there were 2 pairs of tires, followed by the body. All the parts were in place, and the various components were assembled and combined. In just a dozen seconds, a brand new holographic off-road vehicle was made. Even Agent Luo Yajin, who was sitting in the driver's seat, was restored to lifelike. The most amazing thing is that this car can actually run. Agent Luo in the driver's seat turned the steering wheel exaggeratedly, drifting sideways on the ground in a gorgeous curve like in a mountain, and then quickly shifted gears and steered with skillful and coherent movements, and the virtual blue off-road vehicle immediately rushed to the exit. So Chu Cheng continued to drive the Batmobile, scanning and chasing after the tire tracks from behind. During the period, the wheel tracks also scanned the traces of more than one car, and more messy marks chased from behind. The modeling and the detective mode also quickly built models of more vehicles in the picture, one after another, chasing after the off-road vehicle, but they were also thrown off one after another during the pursuit. Some were stuck because of performance problems or the chassis was too low. Some were trying to imitate the drift of experienced drivers and ended up being driven into the drainage ditch, and some were killed by the spike belts thrown by Agent Luo, who was not fair to martial arts and cosplayed as a flip turtle on the spot, and some were simply left behind at the start because of their poor driving skills. In short, Agent Luo's off-road vehicle seemed to have successfully escaped the pursuers. He did not move towards the city. The dim light in the suburbs and the lack of surveillance made it particularly difficult to track him, and the asylum branch quickly lost him. But the Batmobile followed all the way. During the period, it tracked not only the tire marks, but also the bushes that the off-road vehicle crashed into, the crushed branches, and the scratched paint. The Batmobile was like a technological hound, sniffing the smell left by the car all the way, and chasing it relentlessly. Chu Cheng, who watched this modeling from a first-person perspective, felt like he was watching a car chase movie, and it was the kind with full special effects, and the visual impact was also very enjoyable. After shaking off the pursuers, Chu Cheng continued to chase the SUV for a long distance. Suddenly, without any warning, the SUV was overturned. Something suddenly exploded on the side of the car body, and the impact flames were like a burning sledgehammer that deformed the car door. The SUV flipped over, rolled on the ground for several circles, and finally fell on the ground upside down. Chu Cheng paused and played it in slow reverse to see clearly that it was a rocket. Someone fired an RPG at Agent Luo's SUV. Luo Yajin in the virtual SUV also responded quickly. He kicked open the deformed door and got out of the cockpit. Another car appeared in the direction opposite him. The door opened, and a black figure jumped out of the car, seeming to look at Luo Yajin next to the wreckage of the SUV with contempt. Chapter 64. Invisibility. Through Batman's on-site restoration, Chu Cheng roughly saw what was going on here. To put it simply, Agent Luo was ganked in the wild area. Judging from the traces at the scene, he should have resisted for a while, and a gunfight broke out, or there might have been close combat. There were traces of scuffling and falling on the ground. Through Batman's on-site restoration modeling, Chu Cheng could vividly see that one of them threw the other to the ground with an overhand throw. Then the loser was taken away by the winner, leaving intermittent drag marks on the ground. This piece of land is like a silent witness, witnessing everything without saying a word. The battle was over, but the off-road vehicle driven by Agent Luo and the two vehicles driven by the enemy disappeared. The tire marks behind were forked, one to the east and the other to the west. Chu Cheng first controlled the Batmobile to continue scanning in the direction where the off-road vehicle left. It can be seen that after the battle, the overturned off-road vehicle was pushed back by someone and then driven away from the scene. It is said that the dark and humid depths are the cradle of life. The further Chu Cheng drove, the more he felt the taste of life was getting stronger. Soon, the tire tracks were cut off, and the Batmobile stopped at the edge of a lake. The traces disappeared here. Batman gave another hint, there must be something underneath. But this model of Batmobile does not have a diving function. The top door slid open, and Chu Cheng operated Batman to jump out of the chariot. Batman took out a portable respirator from his universal belt, put it on, and then remotely controlled the Batmobile to enter standby mode, and then dived into the water. That's right, Chu Cheng did not forget to lock the Batmobile before entering the water. It is a good habit to lock the car when leaving it. Even the Batmobile is no exception. It is well known that the more luxurious the car, the more expensive the lock. As a top-level tycoon toy, the Batmobile is naturally armed to the teeth. In the safety mode, all four wheels are locked and covered with titanium alloy safety condoms. It is said that in the early years, the old Batmobile was parked in the alley to go out for business. When he came back, he found that the wheels were removed by the naughty kids in the alley with wrenches. Since then, he has had a psychological shadow on tires. After entering the water, Batman installed macro thrusters on the bottom of his boots. The propulsion flame sprayed underwater, causing him to dive into the depths at an accelerated speed. The lake was not too deep, and he soon reached the bottom of the lake. The scanning and the detective mode also helped him quickly locate what he was looking for. An off-road vehicle. It was obviously the off-road vehicle that Luo Yajin drove out of the subbase. At this moment, the car door had fallen off and there was no one in the car. It should be that after the encounter, the winner deliberately sank the car to the bottom of the nearby lake in order to eliminate the traces. Unfortunately, from the scene reconstruction screen created by Batman, Agent Luo Yajin should not be the winner. He was defeated and held hostage by the mysterious attacker, and his car was also sunk to the bottom of this lake, probably to cover up the eyes and ears of the Special Service 9. Chu Cheng took a sip of the drink he had prepared at hand, and at the same time, he controlled Batman to swim back to the shore. He surfaced, took off his respirator, and put it back into his belt, and walked towards the shore dragging his cloak, that was shining due to being soaked in water. Next, Chu Cheng needed to track the traces of another vehicle. The other party must have kidnapped Agent Luo for some purpose. If the other party did not kill him, and then fled in the second vehicle, so now he just needed to return to the scene of the battle and retrack the other wheel track. Then suddenly, without any warning, a ghost appeared on the screen. At this time, the perspective on the screen was that Batman had just surfaced and was putting away his respirator and looking up towards the shore. The figure appeared from the screen without any signs, and the turbid body was almost transparent, and the surrounding bushes and flowers were reflected on his body, like a chameleon. If it weren't for the eye-catching counter-attack prompt sign popping up on the screen, Chu Cheng might not have noticed such a sudden translucent figure at all. The shadow seemed to be holding an axe-like object in his hand, and it was as if he was going to chop it down. Without time to think, he clicked the right button of the mouse almost reflexively. Batman immediately took a defensive posture, crossing his arms to block his head. The transparent axe fell fiercely on Batman's crossed arms. The alloy filling in his gloves blocked the sharp battle axe, but the huge force from the axe also blasted him back. Batman rolled half a circle in the water near the shore, and immediately stood up, and adjusted back to his fighting posture, only to find that there was no one in front of him. Chu Cheng was slightly surprised. It has always been the master who plays mysterious tricks with others, and it is rare for someone to show off in the professional field. Although he didn't see the figure that appeared on the screen just now, from the burly outline and the shape of holding an axe, Chu Cheng easily thought of the classic image of a butcher in a horror movie. Chu Cheng calmly controlled the Batman who stood up and looked around. A lake breeze blew along the water, stirring up ripples, and the dark nightscape also rose and fell slightly. He was the only one by the huge lake. Invisibility camouflage-like abilities? Chu Cheng remembered that Jia Chu had given him a popular science lesson that superpowers might appear when the infection level exceeded 100%. Maybe he was facing such an infected person. So he pressed the X key and immediately activated the detective vision. The detective vision combines the various functions of Batman's helmet, including target recognition, visual enhancement, and infrared imaging. In theory, it should be able to see through invisible camouflage. But he was still the only one in the field of vision of the detective mode. Chu Cheng frowned. Could it be that he had left, steal a knife and run away? This infected person was so cautious, even though he could be invisible. Just thinking about this, he suddenly saw a warning sign flashing on one side of the screen, and at the same time, the translucent figure had appeared on the side of Batman without anyone noticing, and the axe was slashing at his head. Fortunately, Chu Cheng was prepared this time, and he ducked and rolled over to avoid the attack by controlling Batman. At the same time, Batman stood up and immediately raised his hand to throw a dart in the direction of the figure, but the bat dart only made a sound of breaking through the air and nailed into a tree trunk. The figure disappeared again. Chu Cheng understood now. The opponent did not leave, but his stealth ability was rather strange, and somehow he could even deceive the scan of the visual sensor in detective mode. Although there was a counter-attack prompt before the opponent's attack, the two counter-attack prompts just now appeared very quickly. In other words, Chu Cheng reacted quickly enough, otherwise others would not have had time to deal with it. But it was just right. Chu Cheng can now better prescribe the right remedy for this kind of trickery. Batman raised his hand, pinched a ball-shaped object and smashed it under his feet. The metal sphere exploded, and a large amount of smoke suddenly burst out, swallowing his entire body. Chapter 65. Fishing Enforcement. Chu Cheng's guess was right. It was indeed an infected person who appeared by the lake. At this time, he was keeping a certain distance, holding the same battle axe as the butcher in his hand, which had also entered the invisible state, waiting for an opportunity to find a flaw, and prepare to give Batman another fatal blow. But just as he was about to quietly approach, he saw the other party smash a smoke bomb on the spot, and then his figure was hidden in the rapidly spreading smoke. The hidden infected person was stunned for a moment, but soon felt that he guessed the other party's intention. The release of the smoke screen is not only to interfere with vision and hide the whereabouts, but also to prevent his attack. Even if his body hides his whereabouts, it will still disrupt the gas and leave a track when passing through the smoke screen, so that the other party can use it to determine his position. Maybe the other party thinks so. The infected sneered in his heart. His ability is not actually to make his body camouflage like a chameleon, but cognitive disruption. His ability can interfere with the other party's vision and implant the image information of "I don't exist" into the other party. This is also why the detective mode cannot detect him, because he didn't really hide his whereabouts from the optical point of view, but interfered with vision to make himself disappear from the other party's observation. So even in the smoke bomb, it was impossible to observe his movement trajectory. Just when he thought of this, he suddenly felt a chill on his back. He turned his head suddenly and saw that a dark red figure had appeared behind him at some point, rushing straight towards him like a ghost. Daredevil. The infected person naturally didn't recognize Daredevil, but he was shocked. He only had time to turn around and raise his arms to block, and the alloy war stick hit his arm hard, and he staggered away quickly. The infected person was stunned. Who is this? Batman's companion? But how can he see him? Invisibility is the specialty of this infected person. His ability is not only visual deception, but also gives him the talent to minimize the sound of his actions, just like the best ninja. The infected person pulled away and stopped in place like a wooden man, motionless. The opponent also stopped moving, also like a wooden man, motionless. So was it just a coincidence? The infected person took 2 steps to one side cautiously. The other party did not react. The infected person went around behind the other party. The other party kept his back to him and still did not move. So the infected person became bolder. He stepped forward lightly, picked up the axe, and swung it with great force. But he never expected that the other party would shrink his body and avoid it at the critical moment and hit the infected person in the face with a stick. Infected person. This guy really knows his position. The infected person took a stick on his face. His whole head was buzzing, and he pulled back at the same time. No, his invisibility is perfect. This is what he tested privately. Because it is a visual deception, all kinds of visual sensors cannot scan his whereabouts. And the other party was clearly facing away from him before he reacted just now, but he dodged his attack at the critical moment, as if he had eyes behind him. So it is not visible, but audible. The infected person quickly made a guess in his heart. This red guy probably has very good hearing and can identify his position by sound. That's not a big problem. He has already studied the countermeasures for the way that sound can reveal his whereabouts. As an infected person who specializes in stealth skills, he has not only awakened the ability to hide, but also awakened the talent of eliminating sound. As long as he moves slowly enough, he can almost completely eliminate the sound. In addition, he can even cut off his breathing for a short period of time and even control his heart to stop beating completely. Of course, it is impossible for ordinary people, but as a human being, an infected person with an infection degree of more than 100% is already dead, so it is not impossible. The red guy also stopped. The infected person took a tentative step. This time his steps were very light and slow, and his whole body was light and floating, as if he had merged into the breeze blowing from the lakeside. He went around behind Daredevil again, and this time he gently and slowly raised the axe in his hand until the edge of the axe hovered above the other person's head. Then his axe suddenly accelerated and chopped down fiercely at the other person's crown. But unexpectedly, Daredevil's body suddenly tilted to the side, and the axe almost hit his body and swung in the air. Infected? Question mark? What do you mean? I don't even have a heartbeat, and you can hear this? The next stick broke his shoulder blade, and the infected's left arm went limp. But he didn't feel any pain, and the axe in his right hand, which had been swung in the air, was immediately raised up and swept towards Daredevil from bottom to top. The axe was about to hit the Red Devil's body, but he saw the other party twist lightly and dodge it lightly. Then he stretched out his right hand, and the alloy war stick hit the infected's wrist joint. The blow that almost shattered the bones forced him to let go, and the axe fell heavily to the ground. The infected was shocked, and when he looked at the Red Devil, his face was full of horror. No, it's not just that he can hear it. If you can only hear your approximate position, it is impossible to dodge the attack of the battle axe so accurately, and it is even more impossible to perform such a scalpel-like precision attack on the joint bones. This guy can see himself. Brothers, you are so good. For this infected person, this is much more shocking than the other supernatural powers displayed by the other party. Chu Cheng does not know the rich psychological activities of the other party, but if he knows, he may have to laugh on the spot. Tell a joke, Lawyer Ma can see. In fact, let alone seeing the infected, even if you give Lawyer Ma the middle finger in the face, he can't see it. Of course, it's just seeing. As mentioned before, although Lawyer Ma has lost his vision, his remaining 4 senses have been greatly improved under the influence of chemical agents. Even after years of training, Lawyer Ma's 4 senses have been developed to the extreme, causing brain mutations and electromagnetic energy emissions. He reverberates this energy into 360 degrees and can read everything in the environment, centered on himself as a 3D map. Unlike the detective mode that relies on high-tech visual sensing, Lawyer Ma's ability has gone beyond the scope of human senses and the general sense, and is completely in the realm of superpowers. Moreover, this process does not require visual participation at all, so the ability to be invisible in front of him is meaningless. However, it is not a problem to say that it can be seen, because it is not Lawyer Ma who can see it, but Chu Cheng, who is his operator. All objects sensed by Lawyer Ma's radar senses on the screen are reflected on the screen in a vivid 3D modeling form, so Chu Cheng can see the appearance of the invisible person on the screen. The infected person lost his weapon. He immediately pulled away and tried to retreat, but he saw that the man in red was relentless and chased him straight in the direction. Now the infected person is convinced that this guy can definitely see him. Damn, so he actually saw it all the time before, but pretended not to see it and stood there motionless, deliberately tempting him to take the initiative to come forward and reveal his flaws? Fishing enforcement, right? Chapter 66. He is Batman. The infected person's specialty is invisibility. Although his physical strength has increased, he lacks fighting skills. Although he seems to have learned some seemingly reasonable moves, they are all mediocre. Without the blessing of invisibility, he is nothing more than an elite monster with thicker skin than ordinary people in front of the superhero characters, who are good at fighting. After the axe fell out of his hand, his resistance was even more defeated. Daredevil broke his 2 arms, and the ropes shot from the alloy short stick quickly tied him up tightly, hanging him upside down on the tree by the lake. At this time, his invisibility was completely lifted. He was a disheveled man with long dirty hair. He wore a loose black robe with the mark of a withered flower on his chest. When he was hung upside down, the hem of the robe fell down due to gravity, which looked a little funny. Daredevil kicked the infected person on the head. The infected person was kicked away, and his body flew out like a pendulum hanging under a tree. Daredevil grabbed his head as he swung back. "Who are you? Who do you work for?" Daredevil asked in a deep voice. But the infected person was doubting his life at this moment, repeating vaguely this is impossible, and so on like a tape recorder, and had no intention of answering. Chu Cheng clicked the mouse and asked Daredevil to punch him again, but soon realized that the MD madman could not take damage, so it seemed useless to hit him. However, although the damage was ineffective, this punch seemed to at least attract the other party's attention. The madman glanced at Daredevil with swollen eyes and finally spoke. "You have an organization too, right? Also?" Chu Cheng asked. "Who are you working for?" "Working for? No, we don't work for anyone. We just gather for a common purpose." The infected person said. "Your ability, I guess it should be some kind of perception enhancement?" Originally, my mission this time was just to follow the laughing infected person, to make observations and records, and it was just a coincidence that I met you. I wanted to take this opportunity to test what the legendary Batman is capable of, but I didn't expect. To be honest, I always thought that my invisibility was absolute, and that was the most suitable ability for me. A person who no one remembers, no one will notice, a transparent person ignored by the world. Maybe that's why God gave me such power. I just didn't expect that someone's infection ability is to see through my invisibility. It's really ironic. At the end of my life, the only time I don't want to be noticed is at the end. Chu Cheng was not interested in his personal story, but he noticed a few key points from this speech. That laughing infected person, what do you know? When he was ambushed just now, Chu Cheng thought that this must be another infected person infected by the laughing infected source. But he soon realized that it was not, because this guy did not have a healthy smile. The infected person still did not answer. It doesn't matter. I'm just an insignificant guy when I was a human, and I'm not a human anymore. The infected person said calmly, but I have a message for the organization behind you. You can regard this as a provocation. This will be the name of your opponent, Death Soldier. As soon as the voice fell, his upside down head exploded with a snap, and the contents mixed with blood flowed out of the broken neck. Chu Cheng frowned. What? Deadpool? The mean one? Maybe the villains all have strange problems that they feel uncomfortable if they don't explain. This infected person revealed at least a few pieces of information before he exploded. That is, they have some kind of organization, which is likely to be full of infected people. To Chu Cheng, it sounds like a large experience package center. Another point is that this guy may be interested in the laughing infected source, but it sounds like he is not in the same group with him and may not have much to do with this incident. MD, waste of labor time. After being delayed by the infected, Chu Cheng replaced Daredevil with Batman, recalled the Batmobile, and prepared to continue the unfinished work. However, before returning to the scene of the battle to track another trace, he edited a message to share the coordinates of the lake with the 9th Special Service. Of course, it was not him who shared it, but Batman. The information edited and sent through the built-in computer of Batman's battlesuit cannot be tracked or traced back, and no one can find Chu Cheng. If Luo Yajin is really an infected person, then he needs to be dealt with as soon as possible. If not, he also needs to be rescued. In either case, we have to find out where the person is first. And the scene here also needs the Special Service Lunatic Asylum to clean up. Who knows, they can find some clues about the Death Soldier from the body of this invisible infected person, and then I can control Batman to ask them to share information. The coordinate information was sent, and then Batman returned to the car and continued to chase after the other wheel marks. Within an hour, the personnel of the 9th Special Service had successively found the battle point where Agent Luo Yajin's car overturned, and the lake where the car sank, and also found the headless body of the infected person under the tree. Heavy equipment was transported to the lake for salvage operations, and the wreckage of the off-road vehicle was soon fished out. Behaos, the director of the Jiangdu branch of the 9th Special Service, came to the scene to supervise in person. At this moment, his eyebrows were twisted into a ball. Just a moment ago, an anonymous message sent them a string of coordinates, and the location was at the lake where they were at the moment. The message was unsigned, and the origin was unknown, and could not be traced back. Such encryption technology alone is enough to prove that the background of the person coming is not small and worthy of attention. Then they found traces of battle at the first coordinate location, found the upside down body by the lake marked by the second coordinate, and fished out the off-road vehicle that the agents were looking for all over the world. Not long after that, Minister Behaos learned that his base had been invaded. It was the director of the security department, Wang Guangyan, who reported to him. The security department just found out that there were staff members on duty in the vicinity of the server room and the underground parking lot who were unconscious. One of them confessed that before he fainted, he vaguely saw a bat flying towards him, and then his head burst, and a black man in front of his eyes fainted. At the same time, Xiang Zuantong, the leader of the investigation team responsible for tracking down Luo Yajin's whereabouts, also came and said that the investigation team had just confirmed that the car that was fished out was the one that Agent Luo drove away. They speculated that after Luo Yajin got rid of the pursuers, he came to this area, exchanged fire with someone, and then the vehicle sank into the lake. Minister Beiheo's expression was not very good when he heard this. Let me summarize. He cleared his throat and said, "Are you telling me that Batman, alone, came to the computer room of our supposedly unbreakable base like taking a bus? Then he strolled around our building for a long time, as if he was shopping, and went to the underground parking lot to punch in. Finally, after he took all the photos he should take, and stepped on all the places he should step on, he also killed an infected person at the evidence collection site. After that, he waited for the person to send us a message to notify us, and then we knew that he had been in before." Security Director Wang Guanggan hesitated for a moment, and then he boldly reminded that, "Sir, in fact, we also found a new tire mark near the exit of the parking lot. There is only a very short section of the mud, and it cannot be traced to the main road. But that section of tire tracks is obviously new, and it is different from the cars in our garage. Calculated from the width and depth of the tires, it should be a tank-level large vehicle, weighing more than 2 tons. Minister Beiheo stared at him with wide eyes, as if he had seen a ghost. "So you're saying that he not only came in and took a look around, but also drove a 2-ton tank in for a spin, and then your security department didn't find anything like a bunch of blind people?" Wang Guanggan didn't dare to look directly at the minister, because the minister's expression at this moment was like asking, "Are you awake?" Xiang Zuantang from the investigation team next to him didn't say a word the whole time, lowering his head as if silently chanting, "Can't see me," to try to bless Akalin buff, but it was obviously not ideal, because the minister's eyes soon fell on him. Then our elite agents, a whole team of elite investigation teams, have been busy so far and have found nothing, Beiheo said, glancing at the off-road vehicle that had just been pulled out of the water not far away. Then he was alone, using the intelligence stolen from our building. How long did it take him to find this? 20 minutes? Beiheo's moved his eyes back and looked at Xiang Zuantan coldly. "So, do you have anything to say on behalf of the investigation team?" "We are very sorry, sir." Xiang Zuantong, the head of the investigation team, raised his head, his face full of helplessness. "But he is Batman. Pia seedling. Why did my husband run away? My name is Lin Bei, because the fortune teller said that I have a pure yang body, excellent spiritual roots, and a calamity in my life. I'm likely to be targeted by female monks and die a violent death. So I disguised myself for 18 years, and everyone thought I was a beauty. But when I was 18 years old, the leader of the demon cult took me into the demon cult and married me. Rumor has it that the leader of the demon cult is a big devil who does all kinds of evil and is bloody and cruel. That day, I broke the demon cult leader's female body. She turned out to be a female devil. The world didn't even know it. My husband, if you look at me again, I will dig your eyes out." The woman smiled like a flower. "Many female mainstream authors, newcomers and new books, please protect me." Chapter 67 Nightmare. Agent Luo Yajin slowly opened his eyes. His mind was still not fully awake, and his brain was like a ball of paste that had just been shaken. His eyes were heavy, as if they were filled with lead, and there was a layer of mist in front of them. It took him a while to wake up and realize that he was lying on the bed in the bedroom, staring at the ceiling of his apartment. His temples were aching slightly. He couldn't remember what day it was today, nor did he remember what happened before he fell asleep. He stretched his arms out from the quilt and touched the cigarette box and lighter on the bedside table. He sat up lazily against the head of the bed, thinking that he would have a cigarette to calm down anyway, but found that the cigarette box was empty. A bad sign. He got up to check the inventory, but found that there was no inventory at home. Some people's natural enemy for staying in bed is kidney deficiency, but some people's natural enemy for staying in bed is smoking addiction. For a deep smoker like him, running out of ammunition and food is simply a dead end, so he had to put on a coat and go downstairs to refill his ammunition. Leoli, who runs a tobacco shop downstairs, is also an acquaintance. He smiled as soon as he saw Luo Yajin come in. Same old? Yeah, same old. Luo Yajin said as he began to touch his wallet. In fact, as an agent of the 9th Special Service, his salary level is quite high, and he can choose cigarettes and alcohol from the top to the bottom of the price range. But he just loves the street stall goods Zhongyi. That is the favorite brand of the deceased Sheriff Brooke. Laoli turned his head to get a cigarette, and at the same time muttered, "You still have to pay attention to control things like cigarettes. After all, they are not good." Even Laoli, the cigarette seller, can't stand Luo Yajin, who is a heavy smoker who wants to smoke from morning to night. "It's okay, I'm very strong." Luo Yajin smiled indifferently. "Besides, God doesn't know how long someone like me can live. Maybe tomorrow, maybe today, who knows? But screw it. Those don't matter, at least the cigarette is genuine. Enjoy life while you can. It's really your style." Laoli smiled, and his hand movement seemed to slow down slightly. "You know, I've been feeling this way more and more lately." Laoli sighed softly and said, "They say you never know which will come first, tomorrow or an accident. Yes, I think life is always like this. We are always afraid of all kinds of things. Fear of wealth, fear of power, fear of strength. Because we have nothing, we are afraid of all those who have those things. We are walking on thin ice in the shackles of rules and regulations, and we numb ourselves with trivial things. But we know, and have always known, that no matter how much you hide from it, avoid looking at it, it is always there. The thing that everyone fears, the collection of all uncertainties." Luo Yajin began to feel that something was wrong. Although he and Laoli were just regular customers and their relationship with the boss was not very familiar, he could still find something wrong on the other side. Laoli turned around suddenly. What greeted him was not the usual Zangai brand cigarettes, but a fruit knife and a laughing face. "I should have done this a long time ago." Laoli laughed and swung the knife at him. Luo Yajin was startled, but still dodged and counterattacked the opponent's knife-wielding arm. But Laoli laughed and let go of the knife-wielding hand, and the fruit knife fell into his other hand, drawing a silver arc and stabbing at Luo Yajin. Luo Yajin dodged again, stretched out his hand to grab the opponent's wrist to disarm, and the fruit knife fell to the ground. Then he grabbed Laoli's arm and threw him over his shoulder. Laoli smashed through the window with a clang, and countless fragments fell to the sidewalk outside. Luo Yajin kicked the door and put on his headphones. "This is the headquarters." The line was connected, and the voice from the headquarters soon came back. "Headquarters, an infected person accident was found. It is suspected to be the source of the laughter infection, and the level is unknown." Before he finished speaking, the operator in charge made a strange sound. "The source of infection? Ha ha ha, good, very good." Luo Yajin was surprised again. "Headquarters? What's the situation?" "The headquarters is no longer needed. This is a void radio." The operator also started laughing out of breath. What was even more terrifying was that there were more chaotic laughter on the other end. No, it was not only from the headset. Luo Yajin walked out to the street and saw a truck speeding towards him. He dodged in time, and the truck rushed into the tobacco shop with thunderous force, and most of his body was stuck inside. The driver was covered in blood, lying on the airbag and laughing. More people gathered around. There were men, women, old people and children, all with hideous laughter on their faces, laughing heartbreakingly, and surrounded Luo Yajin. The agent tried his best to resist. He knocked one person down with a punch, and kicked another person with a broken nose. But he was soon hugged by the people who followed behind. He used his left hand to punch the person who was holding his right arm, but it seemed that the force was not enough to make the other person let go. The man had a front tooth knocked out, but he was grinning at him with blood in his mouth. At the same time, two other people rushed over and hugged his left hand. He soon couldn't move. Endless laughter seemed to have formed a series of high walls. He felt countless hands pushing him into the crowd, like being pushed underwater, drowning him in the ocean of laughter, until everything became dark and empty. Nothing made sense, only the laughter still lingered in his ears, and then he woke up. The hellish scene disappeared. It turned out that everything was just a nightmare. He woke up from the nightmare and entered another nightmare now. The dirty room, an old incandescent chandelier only illuminated about 2/3 of the room, and the remaining shadows seemed to be dormant everywhere. Elio Yajin frowned and thought for a while. Now his fragmented memory seemed to be slowly connected, and he remembered what happened before. He was called to the subbase, and an agent was questioning him. His face was captured in the surveillance video at the 4th precinct of the Public Security Bureau the night before. Coincidentally, it was the place where he had worked and the identity he had abandoned in the past. The 9th Special Service hoped that he could explain what he did there that night and what he saw, and then he might need to undergo a mental evaluation. Then he escaping his pursuers, and then encountered an ambush. "Ha, you're awake." Elio Yajin came to his senses and realized that there was a person in the shadows of the room. "I'm sorry that I can't make this important meeting more comfortable, but what can I say? I'm a big fan." The person in the dark let out a series of uncomfortable laughs. "Of course I believe that the same is true for you. I know you will definitely be very happy to talk to me face to face. After all, I'm so special to you." Elio Yajin laughed contemptuously while trying to free his tied hands. "I've seen a lot of people like you. Everyone thinks they are special," he said bluntly. "In the end, they are all the same, just pretentious lunatics." "Hahaha, funny. I believe you think so from the bottom of your heart." The man chuckled. "But when you say pretentious lunatic, I guess you must have classified yourself in this category in your heart, right?" He paused, and two piercing eyes seemed to shoot out from the darkness. "That dream, a world of laughter, like a joke. Do you want to know what happened next?" Elio Yajin was surprised. He didn't say anything, but he couldn't help but cast a startled look in the direction of the voice in the darkness, as if trying to adapt to the darkness and see what the person who was speaking looked like. "You are surprised? Why, I know your dream." Hahaha. The answer is actually very simple, even a little bit self-evident. Because like I said, I'm so special to you. The man took the initiative to walk out of the darkness and came to the light, revealing his face. Elio Yajin was even more petrified, as if he had been electrocuted. Under the bleak old-fashioned light, he saw himself. Chapter 68. You can't make a madman crazy again. Elio Yajin stared at the man under the light in front of him without blinking, and for a moment he felt as if he was looking at himself in the mirror. "Don't blink, don't be timid, stare back. It was just a trick, maybe an illusion caused by the infection, maybe a disguise. Although it is very realistic, it is not completely impossible. The infected may have all kinds of strange abilities, and maybe the man in front of him is just one of them." Agent Elio told himself this repeatedly in his heart, constantly forcing himself to stay calm, especially not to show surprise on his face. That was one of the most important experiences he summed up over the years. You can never let the other party tell from your expression how many cards you have left, even if you really have no cards in your hand. But this time, he couldn't do it. Because deep in his heart, it seemed that his body's instinct was telling him that this was neither a disguise nor an illusion. "Don't pretend you don't want to see me." The Elio Yajin on the other side grinned and laughed. "At the branch base, when they showed you the surveillance video, the one with my real face, you couldn't control yourself, right? Because you received the message I sent you, my greeting through that camera. You want to see me. Every cell in your body is so eager, because we are the most special to each other." Elio Yajin didn't say anything. Indeed, when he was at the branch base, he suddenly got hot-headed and rushed out of the building. It seemed like a momentary hot-headedness. Until now, he has not completely figured out why. Afterwards, he explained to himself that he was such a free-spirited person, doing whatever he wanted. Maybe he just didn't want to be detained and restrained. Maybe he didn't trust other investigators and just wanted to find out the truth of the matter by himself. But the truth is that he was resisting facing this reality. That is, he subconsciously really wanted to see the person with his face in the surveillance video. "Who are you?" He squeezed out 3 words from his teeth. Hahaha, what an interesting question. The Elio Yajin on the other side laughed out loud. "Have you ever seen someone ask who you are in front of a mirror? You are not me." "Of course I'm you." The other party thought for a moment, "But if you insist, why not call me Elio Shion?" That was Elio Yajin's abandoned identity, a person who was already dead in law. Luo Yajin didn't say anything, just continued to stare at him, as if he wanted to see through the other person's thoughts through that face that looked exactly like his own. "So it's always been you?" he asked, the laughing source of infection? "Those infected people, the monsters in the urban area. That's too polite." Luo Xian smiled. "Rather than saying it's me, it's better to say we. You and me, those are our common wishes. If you insist on asking clearly, then you can regard me as a part of you, something bred from the nothing in your heart. Every time you are anxious about the future, afraid of the uncertainty of everything, and lose confidence in the beliefs you have held for many years, I become a little stronger, and it has been like this for years. I'm your shadow, drawing nourishment from the shadows in your heart, and becoming a little stronger every day. Then until that day, the day when poor old Brooke took the bullet for you." Crack. A new little guy broke out of the shell. "That's me." Luo Yajin gritted his teeth and glared at him. "No, I never thought about it." "What didn't you think about? Just go out and break a few necks on a whim. Carry a gun and give a random group of old unlucky guys a volley of bullets." Luo Xian laughed. "You see, it's not surprising that we actually want the same thing. After all, we are all one. So this is exactly what I've been saying to people. The unknown tomorrow is like, well, a big bad wolf, and all the helpless people under that hungry gaze are the poor sheep. They have nowhere to escape, and they don't know who the big bad wolf will eat tomorrow, and they can't do anything about it. And what we want is change, to add a little spice to this boring world. We make the sheep mysterious to the big bad wolf, and let it experience the fear of nothingness. That is your deepest wish, Agent Luo. You just don't have the courage to face it for the time being. But it doesn't matter, don't worry, haha, because I was born for this. To do what even you can't do, to be the person you need to be, but dare not take that step. That's different. I kill all people who deserve it. Ha, I bet you think so." Luo Xian continued with a smile. "Don't worry, I know what you really want. It's already very fast. My experiments after the previous events have been completed, and now I'm ready. The series of events last night were just a small test, and today is a real deal. The source of infection I planted is about to be harvested, and today I will start from Area Z. Everything will be fine, and it will become what our ideal world should be like." "Stop, you lunatic." Luo Yajin gritted his teeth. Looking at the familiar yet unfamiliar face in front of him, he felt that he had never hated himself so much. He wanted to break this guy's neck, but his hands were tied behind his back, and he couldn't break free for a while. "You're welcome." Luo Xian grinned. "To be honest, I've been looking forward to it for a long time. Originally, we should have been prepared well in advance, but some strange guys have appeared recently. But it's okay, hahaha, they make the game a lot more exciting." Snap. Darkness came suddenly. The old chandelier suddenly went out, and the whole room was dragged into darkness in an instant. The two people in the room realized what this meant in an instant. Batman. I don't know when. Darkness has become his symbol. There was a brief silence, and then laughter rang out in the darkness. But it did not come from Luo Xian, the source of the laughter, but from Agent Luo Yajin, who was tied to a chair. Luo Xian turned to him with interest. "What? Are you also beginning to find the charm of nothingness?" "No." Luo Yajin sneered in the darkness. "I'm just laughing at the disaster that is about to happen to you." "Ha, are you so confident in that guy?" Luo Xian disagreed. He laughed dryly twice. "I think you should have discovered that he is just a mortal. He tried to disguise himself with masks and fancy props, but in the end he is just a mortal. I will prove this. Look, Agent Luo, he is no different. He does not give people the hope of eliminating nothingness, but only a mirage like Mars." Luo Yajin still sneered. "You said you are me, so I'm you. So no one knows you better than me." He said word by word. "You seem to think you are his opponent, something that is against him. Then listen carefully. I will tell you now. You are nothing in front of him." "What did you say?" Although it was not clear in the dark, Luo Yajin seemed to feel that the other party's smile had become a little stiff. "Ha, I said you are nothing in front of him." Luo Yajin sneered. "You claim to be the incarnation of nothing? Funny. You may be able to deceive others, and even yourself. But if you are really something born from my heart, then you can't deceive me. I know what you are." So I'm saying this, you are not worthy of being his opponent. I have seen him with my own eyes, and I know what kind of person he is. Maybe he is not a special person, but you want to infect him and make him crazy like you? That's impossible. Aluoyajin simply leaned back in his chair and smiled contemptuously. Because you can't make a madman crazy again. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69. Various Martial Arts. Da. Aluoyajin was not idle during the conversation with Aluoyajin, as if he was always paying attention to the movements of the unknown being in the shadows. When he was halfway through the conversation with Aluoyajin, his arm turned into a machine gun, and suddenly a volley of bullets was fired in a certain direction in the darkness. A series of sounds of bullets hitting the wall came from the shadows, and then the darkness returned to silence. Aluoyajin, who was tied to the chair, taunted, "Ha, I think you just killed a rat. Good shooting." Aluoyajin didn't say anything, but just laughed again. Then he suddenly turned around, and his free hand turned into a black grenade launcher. A tail flame tore through the darkness and shot out, blowing through one wall of the room. There was still no trace of Batman. Great, all the cockroaches next door were killed. Aluoyajin continued to taunt, "Although you have no talent for being a lunatic, have you ever considered becoming a cockroach killer? Ha, very funny, I like your sense of humor." Aluoyajin smiled, walked towards the direction of the howitzer explosion, and continued to be alert to the movements around him. Just after walking a few steps, he suddenly turned back and fired a burst of bullets at the ceiling. Dust fell like raindrops, and a few seconds later the ceiling collapsed under the weight. The extinguished old-fashioned chandelier fell to the floor and shattered, and the fragments flew everywhere. Good shooting skills. This time I broke a lamp. Aluoyajin was still output. "Mind if you untie me, so that I can applaud you?" "Don't worry, let the bat flutter a few more times." Aluoyajin laughed strangely. He can't jump for much longer. As he said that, he suddenly turned the muzzle of the gun and started shooting it somewhere in the darkness. But this time, it was not a stop, but it locked onto that direction, as if it had bitten its target to death, and would not let go. The continuous flashes of the muzzle fire illuminated the dark space, and the bullets poured out like a flying fire dragon. Aluoyajin laughed against the violent noise, and said in a hoarse voice, "Ha, I caught him. He is just a guy who likes to play tricks. Although he is an interesting guy, but..." Boom. He finally couldn't finish his words. Because just when he was halfway through, the wall behind him was suddenly smashed into pieces. The dark beast broke through the wall with a mechanical roar and hit Aluoyajin in the waist. Aluoyajin was like a mosquito that was slapped. He crashed through the wall and flew to the next room, falling into a pile of rubble. It was the Batmobile. In fact, although Aluoyajin seemed to be randomly sweeping the pitch black place, he actually caused some trouble for Chu Cheng. Chu Cheng felt that this guy's alertness was indeed a bit like the soldier in the novice tutorial. To be honest, after the tutorial, when operating Batman to perform various infiltrations, Chu Cheng felt like he had suddenly switched to simple mode. Most people are not as alert as the minions in the tutorial AI. When he operated the Batmobile and relied on black technology to scan and track the traces to find Aluoyajin, he still first scanned and studied the building structure through the detective mode to determine the opponent's location, and then quickly found the best infiltration route. Of course, the main entrance was not considered at the beginning. After all, this is not the set of New Batman, Man of Steel, where he can withstand the firepower of rifles and shotguns. Most of the serious Batman still honestly jumps out of the window and goes through the back door. So don't be fooled by Batman's mysterious performance in movies and TV shows. It's very cool. In fact, it's still a bit painful to operate from a first-person perspective. Stealth requires awareness and patience. When you go out to attack someone, you can show off, but it's only for a few moments. Most of the time, you have to be patient and wait for an opportunity, or walk on your knees like a turtle. It is well known that the official combination name of Superman and Batman is world's finest, which means the best partner in the world. Not only are these two people invincible in terms of strength and wisdom, but their sunny and cautious personalities complement each other perfectly. They have been regarded as the best partner in the American comics circle for many years. But when these two do things, Chu-Cheng can't help but think that Superman is observant and alert, and the dark shadows in front of him are no different from daylight. So every time they attack together, Superman folds his arms and floats in the sky, patiently watching the master walking on his knees behind the enemy with a pair of cat ears, and always warns Superman not to interfere. So Superman can wait 100 times more patiently than ordinary people, while Batman sneaks around to do the work that he can do 10 times a second by himself. The most interesting thing is that Superman can not only hold back his laughter, but also always express his admiration in the end. Wow, brother, you are really awesome. The back row operation just now was simply amazing. Sneak into the room and use the night vision function and enhanced vision of the detective mode to quickly see the situation in the room. He saw two agents LUO. One was on guard nearby, and the other was tied to a chair. This made Chu-Cheng almost doubt whether there was something wrong with the game display. That made him see the schizophrenic perspective of Agent LUO. Although Luo Xiuan's random sweeps made it difficult for Chu-Cheng to find an opportunity to get close, it didn't matter. On the surface, he seemed to be controlling Batman to circle around in the dark and wait for an opportunity to get close, but in fact, it was just to attract attention. The real killer move was the Batmobile parked outside and receiving his remote control. All sounds of the Batmobile were eliminated when the stealth mode was turned on. Luo Xiuan, who was concentrating on finding Batman, didn't notice its approach at all and was suddenly knocked through the wall and flew out. But perhaps it should be said that he is worthy of being a severely infected person. Being blown away by a heavy tank, Luo Xiuan seems to have no problem. After he fell into the next room, he rolled on the ground and was about to stand up. But before he could stand firm, he saw that the gun barrels had popped out from both sides of the Batmobile in front of him. A series of firecracker-like explosions. Large caliber bullets flew out of the tank continuously and instantly shot Luo Xiuan into a sieve. Among all kinds of martial arts, this is machine gun shooting. It is reasonable that a weapon of this caliber hitting a person is not as simple as penetrating the flesh and leaving a hole. This level of firepower, coverage and impact power can directly blow a human body into pieces. But the opponent is obviously far from human configuration. I saw a residual image flashing out from the rain of bullets and actually avoided the direction of the bullets to one side. Luo Xiuan laughed and jumped sideways, flipped to the ground, paused for a short time, and then jumped out again. But at that brief pause, Chu-Cheng also saw the opponent's posture from Batman's perspective. He remembered that when he went to the 9th Special Service Division to receive basic training on the day of his employment, he heard that no infected person who could directly fight against thermal weapons had been found yet. Even if they awakened various strange abilities, they were still carbon-based creatures and did not have the foundation to resist firebombing. But what he saw now seemed to exceed that limit. Luo Xiuan no longer looked like a human. His skin seemed to be covered with a layer of unknown substance, and his whole body was wrapped in something like jelly. He looked like a monster with a human shape, although he seemed to have human limbs, but they were grotesquely twisted. The original facial features of his face had disappeared, and the base color turned dark green. In the middle of that face was a strange single eye, and below it was a strangely grinning mouth. His body was covered with bullet holes, but he seemed to be unaware of it. He laughed while avoiding the rain of bullets from the Batmobile, and at the same time, used the rocket launcher that his arm turned into to fight back against the Batmobile. A rocket hit the outer shell of the Batmobile, and the explosion caused the body to slide sideways half a meter. Although the Batmobile armor in the game can block rockets, the armor health will still drop, and it can't take too many rockets. Hahaha, see. Your toys are useless to me. Luo Xiuan laughed. I can do this with my bare hands. He couldn't finish his words again. This time, the ceiling cracked. The roof was blown to pieces, and the Vulcan cannon sprayed a long tongue of fire accurately towards Luo Xiuan's location, blowing him up into the air. A variety of martial arts. This is the Bat Fighter. Chapter 70. The Batman Who Laughs is lack of wisdom and stratagem. It is said that truth is everywhere within the range, and the evil gods can be destroyed if the firepower is in place. No matter what monsters come first, it is always right to do it. While the Bat Fighter gave a burst of firepower suppression, Chu Cheng quickly operated Batman to bring Agent Luo Yajin on the other side. Luo Xian, who was busy taking bullets, certainly had no hands to interfere at this moment. Batman easily brought Agent Luo and jumped out of the abandoned old warehouse through the window. If they were a little restrained in the choice of weapons for the Bat Fighter because they were in the warehouse just now, then this concern is gone now. This guy who calls himself Luo Xian is quite particular about the choice of a dress. He specially picked such a broken warehouse with no one around, as if he was afraid that the decisive battle location would be in the downtown area and people would not be able to use heavy weapons. His thoughtfulness is comparable to Tom in Tom and Jerry. He dug the pit himself and prepared the people to line it, and even prepared his own grave. So Chu Cheng immediately remotely controlled the Batmobile and the fighter after surveying the terrain. Given the location and terrain, he would feel sorry for the other party's good intentions if he didn't arrange a complete bombing package. All kinds of weapons opened fire at the same time, and without the hostages' concerns, the dilapidated warehouse was torn into pieces by the amazing firepower in an instant. The high temperature flames were reflected on the sky, and the entire piece of land was turned into a sea of fire. Even the two people who had evacuated far away from the building were affected by the aftermath of one of the bombings, and a ball of flames swept across them. However, although Batman's defense is not comparable to a certain shield rack in the current hero pool, the performance of his money-capable armor is not to be underestimated. At such a long distance, this little aftermath can still be blocked, and he can resist the impact with just a cloak. When the two turned around, the entire warehouse had disappeared, leaving only a burning wreckage. It is hard to imagine that any creature in reality can survive such a firebombing. But Luo Xian really did it. A round of bombing by the Bat Fighter blew his mutated body into a bloody mess. One of his arms was blown off, and a large part of his abdomen from his shoulder was hollowed out. But thanks to the secret door he prepared in advance, he managed to escape. Although Luo Xian was a laughing madman, he was a madman with a plan. He had long thought of the possibility of being ganked, so he prepared a secret door in this base in advance. A secret passage connected to the underground pipe allowed him to escape directly from the warehouse into the sewer system. It was because of this that he avoided the fate of being blown into pieces. But even so, when he jumped into the turbid groundwater, his whole body was on fire. Those who didn't know would think he was cosplaying as the Human Torch. And when he got into the secret door, one of his legs was blown off, and the whole person basically rolled in like a ball. And I don't know if it was because of his self-cultivation as a madman, adhering to the principle that the head can be cut off, the blood can flow, but the laughter cannot stop. The child's limbs were broken, and half of his body was blown away. He was laughing while bleeding, and when he went into the water halfway through laughing, he was filled with a mouthful of foul-smelling and turbid groundwater. It was really too difficult. But anyway, he escaped. He was washed out in the turbulent groundwater system like a large piece of garbage, and was washed into the river water along the coast through a drainage outlet. Luo Xian floated up from the river, first spitting out a large mouthful of groundwater mixed with blood, and then he laughed again while coughing dryly. It felt like laughing at Batman's lack of wisdom and strategy. He dug a hole in advance and ran away smoothly. At this moment, the stupid bat might still be smug in the ruins of the warehouse. What a joke. He was the incarnation of nothingness, the source of eternal laughter. How could he be fooled by a mere bat pretending to be a ghost? Then he suddenly realized something was wrong. He turned his head suddenly and saw a light suddenly lit up under the calm river water, as if there was a dangerous beast hidden under the water. The waves were pushed to the sides, and a black shark-like steel floated to the surface and cast a dangerous look at Luo Xian. Bat submarine. Luo Xian's smile froze for a moment. The next second, a mine almost exploded on him. The violent impact blew him away, and his body was sucked into the chaotic vortex of water. He turned his head and fled faster, while his remaining hand transformed into a weapon to fight back. but his accuracy was affected by the chaotic water flow, and the bullets seemed to be useless against that thing. The bad submarine was like an underwater death god, biting him behind him, and all the bullets were bounced off the cabin glass and the dark hull. The rocket launcher might be useful, but Luo Xiaoyuan's arm was blown off, and he has not recovered yet. His overall physical condition is also very bad, and he can't withstand that level of weapon. He can only turn around and continue to run away. Torpedoes exploded one after another beside him. Luo Xiaoyuan, who took tons of damage, finally climbed ashore, dragged his half-broken body, and ran away without taking his head back. Fortunately, the thing behind at least respected its identity as a submarine. It was beyond its jurisdiction when it landed on the shore, and it didn't turn into four wheels on the spot to continue chasing it. Don't say, this is really like the operation of Batman's equipment. After landing on the shore, Luo Xiaoyuan quickly avoided the eyes and ears and dodged into a dark alley. He leaned on a broken trash can, panting and waiting for his body to heal, and at the same time laughed dryly. That's why it is said that Batman is not smart enough. As long as you use your brain, you can think that he is seriously injured at this time, and even if he lands on the shore, he can't run too far. If he had been waiting here in advance, he would have been split on the spot right now. Luo Xiaoyuan, as if he suddenly felt something. He turned his head stiffly and saw that in this dark alley, the Dark Knight had been standing behind him at some point, like a silent ghost. Luo Xiaoyuan immediately turned around, and his still intact arm turned into an axe shape and swept away. But Batman dodged it with a flick of his body and punched Luo Xiaoyuan's one-eyed forehead, and the electric shock gloves exploded a string of electric sparks on his head. He shook his body and was about to fight back, but he saw that a dart had been inserted into the joint between his arm joint and the axe. The red indicator light flashed twice, followed by a bang, and the explosives filled in the bad dart exploded. His arm was blown off along the joint, and the axe flew a long way in the air. Luo Xiaoyuan was blown to the ground with his limbs broken, and 3 of his limbs were broken. He gasped with great effort, twisted his body while laughing dryly, and tried to crawl away like a snake. A person appeared in front of him. Luo Xiaoyuan stopped. He slowly raised his head and saw Luo Yajan's expressionless face with a cigarette in his mouth. Luo Yajan stretched out his right hand. Then his arm began to deform and gradually condensed into a steel-like material, and also transformed into the image of a number 1 large caliber gun barrel, pointing at Luo Xiaoyuan's head. Luo Xiaoyuan looked at the black muzzle pointing at his head, pondered for 2 seconds, and then laughed again. Ha 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 ha, a good joke, Agent Luo. He coughed twice. Whatever, it's the same. Luo Yajan ignored him and didn't say anything else. The dark barrel on his arm directly spewed out dazzling flames. It wasn't over yet. The second and third rounds followed. He finally stopped until the kinetic energy of the bullet smashed the grotesque face into a bloody mess, completely crushed it into pieces, and exploded into countless fragments. Luo Yajan blew out a smoke ring, and the half of the smoking gun barrel on his arm disappeared, turning back into a hand. He breathed a sigh of relief. I didn't know I could do this. It is expected to be released on August 1st. After looking at the same period, I feel that I will be beaten by a group of big guys. Nervous. Book a subscription in advance and ask for support for the first order. I hope that I won't be killed by the big guys too badly. Cack. Chapter 71. That's why I'm here. Chu Cheng was a little surprised when he saw that Agent Luo had transformed his arms into weapons just like the funny guy lying on the ground. What is this? The same type of stand as the one on the other side? He remembered that Chen Miao said that Agent Luo's infection level was already very high, so maybe now his infection level has exceeded 100%, reaching the level of awakening superpowers. Luo Yajan's body swayed. His feet were a little numb at this moment. He stretched out a hand to support the wall, and then sat down against the wall. He took out a cigarette from his pocket slowly, and before putting the cigarette box away, he glanced at Batman in the shadow next to him. Want one? He asked. Batman stood indifferently in the darkness, without saying a word. Luo Yajan didn't mind. He lit one himself, and took a deep puff, as if he was savoring it endlessly. It's cheap stuff, but I'm used to it. He smiled. Old Brooks' favorite. Ha, if you've met the old guy, you'll know, he's a real old smoker. You know what, but I used to hate smoking, and even seeing other people smoking would make me feel bad. I used to debate with old Brooke all the time. But guess what he said? He said that tobacco tax is the bulk of annual fiscal revenue, and the money will be used in more important places, maybe educating more children and saving more lives. He said that smokers rely on completely voluntary self-sacrifice to make the world a better place, and they should be regarded as heroes. Haha, isn't it nonsense? Agent Luo leaned against the dark wall and took another puff of cigarette. I said he didn't listen at all. In fact, his wife scolded him many times. She was a very good person and very warm to people. She also made very delicious rolls with meaty fillings, potatoes and appropriate sauces. At that time, he often took me to his house for dinner, and every time I could eat rolls made by his wife. You can't find better rolls than those anywhere else. In fact, you won't find them in the future. Never again. He was silent for a while and didn't say anything, just smoking silently. The spark quickly burned from the cigarette, but to the filter. He threw away the cigarette butt and took out the cigarette box to smoke a new one. And his little daughter, Agent Luo said softly, a 6-year-old girl. You just can't believe how meticulously God had to carve out such an angel. I remember on her 6th birthday, Brooke invited me to his house. The little girl ran around screaming and smeared the cream of the birthday cake on my face. Then her mother caught her. Hahaha. Her mother told her not to do that to guests. She lowered her head to admit her mistake, but secretly she was still making faces at me. Then I made faces at her too. It's funny, right? They are really good to me. I used to have no family, no worries, only a passion and things I wanted to do. But at that time I really couldn't help thinking, the so-called family. Maybe this is what it is. It was from that child's eyes, those eyes that were always bright and beautiful, as if they didn't belong to this world, that I felt like I saw the future. Or rather, it was what we expect the future to be like. Luo Yajin took another puff of cigarette and blew out smoke rings. After Brooke left, I saw her again. That angelic child, he said. The radiance disappeared. It was the first time I saw her eyes like that. They lost their brilliance, only a haze remained, a haze that would never go away. For the first time, I felt my illusions shattered. The hope for the future that I had always been able to see was suddenly torn to pieces by reality. He looked through the swirling smoke at the body with its head blown to pieces lying not far away. I thought I had walked out of it, but that was just my wishful thinking. The appearance of this guy reminded me of this, because it was not someone else who created the devil, but me. He suddenly looked behind him. Have you ever had this experience? The only person who matters to you, the person who has become an indispensable part of you without you realizing it, they are suddenly taken away, as if a huge hole has been dug out in your heart that can never be filled. And the worst thing is, you feel as if it's all your fault. After a long silence, Batman and the Shadow spoke for the first time. I understand. He made a low and hoarse voice that was very strange, but it seemed to have a kind of magnetism inexplicably. Luo Yajin soon realized that it was a voice processed by a voice changer, but he didn't care. Haha, this is the first time I heard you speak directly. He laughed with a cigarette in his mouth. Damn it, I don't know why I said this to you. I thought I would never say this to anyone in my life, but I think it might be because of this. After that incident, I had almost given up. The future I could see had long disappeared. I spent every day aimlessly, looking for prey, looking for battles, and looking for a suitable grave for myself. But deep in my heart, I couldn't see what I was fighting for. Maybe this is why this guy was born, disguising himself with a smile, looking as if he knew everything, and laughed at everything, but in fact he was just covering up his incompetence. Those unknown things, ancient and evil existences, are always good at discovering the worst side of people's hearts and let us create our own demons. I thought I could be fearless, look directly into the nothingness that everyone fears, look directly into the eyes of the demon, and tell it that I'm not afraid of the right option. But I was wrong. For a moment, I seemed to really understand why old Brooke always avoided trouble and was so cautious. Maybe there are really some things in the world that are more important than yourself. Maybe sometimes you just can't let go and do the right thing. because what we have to face are often things that human power can't fight against at all. I mean, bullets can kill prisoners, maybe 1, maybe 10 or even more, but you can't defeat the darkness itself. I can't imagine that one day I would say this to someone. But I always feel that you will definitely understand it, right? But, yes. A hoarse voice came from the shadows. That's why I'm here. Luo Yajin laughed, and laughed for a long time. Haha, that's true. I think I understand now why I said all this to you. Remember what I said just now, that I couldn't see the future a long time ago. But recently, I seem to suddenly feel that I can see it vaguely. Although that road is not easy to walk, and it is no longer the same as my past naive expectations. But at least I can see the direction again, thanks to you and your amazing companions. So no matter who you are and where you come from, I do have 3 cliché words to say to you. He paused, frowned, turned his head, and looked behind him, only to find that he was the only one left in the dark alley. Batman had left without knowing when. Chapter 72 Phantom. Before he finished his second cigarette, the roar of propellers began to sound in the air. A transparent hurricane rolled up on the ground, and an armed helicopter shone a searchlight from above. Luo Yajin sat with his legs crossed, and a cigarette in his mouth, waving his hand in the direction of the helicopter. A moment later, the agents with live ammunition surrounded him. The leader was none other than Xiang Zuantong, the captain of the Jiangdu branch action team. Luo Yajin also knew this captain. He smiled and waved at the other party, saying, "Don't get excited. I won't run or bite anyone. The person you want to catch is over there." He pointed to the human figure that fell to the ground with its head smashed into pieces. Xiang Zuantang looked in the direction he pointed and frowned. "What is that?" The reason why he asked what it was instead of who it was because the appearance did not look like a human. "It's me," Luo Yajin said indifferently. Then he shrugged when the other party frowned. "It's a bit complicated to explain. Maybe I have to go back and talk slowly. It just so happens that I can't walk now. You can take me back on the way. I want to meet Professor Miyazaki now. There are things I want to tell him." He raised a hand. Under the astonished gaze of everyone, the hand quickly changed its shape and turned into the shape of a gun. "I don't know what's going on." He smiled, "But I guess the professor should be very interested." With the high cooperation of Agent Luo, he was quickly taken back to the mothership after a series of physical examinations and psychological evaluations. After hearing about his changes, Professor Miyazaki was indeed very interested and rushed over in a hurry, with a posture of his Kankanjan healthy. But before testing his awakening ability, the superiors had other more concerned things. The source of the infection of the crazy laughter. Agent Luo also briefly explained to them what the situation was. In short, he was a passionate young man before he came to work at the mental hospital, but one day he split apart. One half of him ran to this sky grave to work at the mental hospital, and the other half became a happy man who smiled all day long and brought smiles to people all over the world. Then one day, the workers at the mental hospital chopped up the happy man, and the story ended. He explained it concisely, but what he said shocked the people in the 9th department for a long time. They were not interested in the story and mental journey behind Agent Luo. Such matters were either handled by Professor Miyazaki or the psychological assessment department. What they cared about was the separation of another individual from the body of a special agent. "I told you before that this might happen," Professor Miyazaki mentioned at the meeting. "I told you a long time ago that special agents might derive new spiritual individuals. But you didn't say that the spiritual body would split into some new monster." Chairman Li Changcheng said. "Yes, because this is the first time this has happened today, and it has never happened before." Professor Miyazaki said, "I believe what I said before was, unexpected mutations will occur. Look, this is what I said. The separated spirit becomes a new individual. It may have the memory of the original owner, born from the deepest darkness of a person's heart. I named them phantoms." There was a small commotion in the conference room. A new term made them a little uneasy, because once you give things a new name, it feels like accepting their existence and acquiescing that such things may appear again. What we know now is that the phantom separated from the body of Agent Luo Yajin. First of all, its own strength exceeds the upper limit of the human body and all the special people and infected people we know. Its physical ability is also outstanding, and it has the ability to weaponize body parts within a limited range. This part has yet to be tested. In addition, the infected people infected by it may be remotely controlled by the main body, and there is a greater probability that a spiritual body will be left behind, and the fusion of multiple spiritual bodies once transformed into the posture of a giant monster. But it is not certain whether the above are the common characteristics of all phantoms, and further observation is needed. Wait for a moment. Minister Hercules of the Operations Department interrupted him. You just said all phantoms? Does it mean? Oh, of course. Did I forget to mention it just now? Professor Miyazaki adjusted the frame of his glasses. I think the appearance of the phantom marks that the infection has completely entered a new stage, and what we are about to deal with will also be a brand new source of infection. So yes, I think there will be more and more phantoms in the future. Chu Cheng also temporarily logged off the Batman and took a breath to rest for a while. What Agent Luo said makes sense. Maybe sometimes there is a reason why good people cannot stand up. No one can be truly free of worries, and not everyone can face the fear of nothingness. Sometimes the right thing comes with a price, and people must weigh whether they have the ability to take responsibility for this choice before making each choice. But as he said at the end, through the mouth of Batman, that's why I'm here. Now he has jumped out of that category. He doesn't have to take risks himself, and he doesn't have to worry about implicating himself or the people around him. He can be carefree and do things that others can't do. He can plunge into the unknown that others dare not face without hesitation, face the fear called nothingness, and then grin. Come on, I'm here. A flesh and blood body can be hurt, can be targeted, and can be defeated. But if it is a symbol, it will be indestructible. After this mission, although he relied on Batman's money ability to arrange it in advance and reproduced a wave of classic Huaran Road Point JPG, Batman Limited Edition, he still realized his shortcomings. Although tanks, submarines, and fighters are powerful weapons, and they did play a suppressive role this time, they made him realize the limitations of these heavy firepower. First of all, a single shot has a wide range and can easily injure innocent people. Today, the opponent chose a good location for his grave. If it were in a downtown area, the small guy would dive into the crowd, and the bat fighter would fire a string of missiles, and the morgue would be overloaded tomorrow. Like last time, it was really useful against large monsters, but it might be less effective against humanoid monsters with superhuman physical strength, extremely strong resistance, and high agility. For example, this time, even if he said that his side was an unexpected sneak attack, Luo Xiaoyan still escaped under the firepower of the fighter. If he hadn't scouted in advance and used detective mode to scan and predicted the opponent's "this is my escape route" in advance and had a wave of this place's full style ganks, he might have been really run away. He still needs powerful heroes. So next came his favorite card pull drawing session without inner ghosts. Thanks to the first helmsman of this book, 931 for the reward. Thank you. Chapter 73 Martial Arts Master. As usual, before drawing a card, you should take a shower and change clothes to wash off the non-ki before you can start. What he lacks now is a superhero, an attacker who can take on frontal output, preferably stronger than Captain America, or even if not as strong as Captain America, at least he has other special skills that are not repeated in positioning. Batman's abilities and equipment make him more balanced in positioning and can take on most tasks. But he is an assassin after all, and is not suitable for frontal combat. The world famous painting the 7 giants of the Justice League fighting in a group, but if you count carefully, you will find that there are only 6 of them in the picture. Most people may only think that the painter's mathematics is probably not taught by a physical education teacher after studying it for a long time, but true fans can see the hidden subtitle Batman Solo Stealing Tower. In fact, there is no way. After all, the master is not suitable for team combat. Not to mention that in a frontal team battle, throwing bat darts to rub heads against a group of teammates who are always reverse ascending to heaven and calling themselves gods, it seems a bit muggle, and assassins are indeed not very compatible with the team. The original publication also gave a special page to complain about this. It was about the early days of the establishment of the Justice League. After the fight, everyone was cleaning up the battlefield and reviewing the situation. Then the Master quarreled with Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern, who was also known as Hal Jordan. In short, the two of them cooperated in the opposite way during the fight. Hal Jordan flew into the air, raised his Green Lantern ring, and shouted, "Fear the light of God." The Green Lantern ring burst into a 1,000-foot light, illuminating every corner of the battlefield like a green sun. So at this moment, everyone, both the good guys and the bad guys, saw Batman, who was hiding in the shadows and walking on his knees, to approach the bad guys. The scene was very embarrassing for a while. After the fight, the Master was furious and said, "Green Lantern, you stinky idiot, can you calm down for a while? I was cutting the back row and you were clicking on my position like a firefly. Are you sick?" Hal Jordan was originally a hot-tempered person, and he didn't like what he said again. He said, "Your only superpower is walking on your knees like a fool. Is it my fault?" It is said that from then on, the Master became addicted to circling and stealing the base, and never played with this group of teammates again. With more heroes, it is more difficult to draw better positioning without duplication. Fortunately, after accumulating points for a few days, and adding the rewards from brushing the boss at night, I barely managed to collect more than 20 shots, including the coupons. The first hero to be shipped in this wave is also a well-known hero. Although he didn't make a familiar face in the movie version, he has been sitting on the TV series for 8 seasons. He is the image ambassador of the well-known domestic chewing gum brand in DC, the modern Robin Hood, and the Green Arrow known as Tang-Gen. If we must say what is different between Tang-Gen and other mortal superheroes, there is no doubt that he is good at shooting. He is good at it in bed and on the street. Although he is a shooter, Tang-Gen's best skill in the play seems not to be shooting, but his superb bow fighting skills. It seems that his understanding of the bow is that it is better to use this thing to hit people than to be an honest back row ADC. If there is a task that requires a shooter's expertise, he may be useful, but it's just better than nothing. After all, when Tang-Gen first applied to join the Zenglian, he was ridiculed by Green Lantern Hara. At that time, Hara pointed at Batman next to him and said, "Sorry, but we already have one who can't do anything, so we don't need a second one." The next one to be shipped is another female hero, but she is different from the previous female heroes who have meaner volume and save fabric. This time the girl is petite, without the exaggerated curves that look a bit different from ordinary people in the three-dimensional world, and her whole body is tightly wrapped in a black battlesuit. In layman's terms, if most of the previous female heroes tend to be queens, then this one feels more like a lolly. It's just that her whole face is covered with a black mask. From the pointed ears of Batman and the golden bat on the small hills on her chest, it is not difficult to see that this should be a lolly from the Bat family. The third generation Batgirl, Cassandra Cain. Unlike Cassandra, who was transformed into a lolly pickpocket in the 2020 Lame Birds of Prey movie, the original Cassandra has a great background. Her father is David Cain of the Assassin's League, the world's top assassin. Although he has almost no outstanding achievements to show off, he is considered to be a top master in the DC world in terms of skills, and he can even fight against Batman, it is said. Her mother is even more extraordinary. Her mother is the famous Lady Shiva in DC, a woman who was once recognized as the strongest fighting master in the DC world. She is the existence of the ceiling in the fighting world. If we only talk about martial arts skills, even Batman is ashamed of himself. But as we all know, just as the world's #1 in the novel is a debuff, it is basically a background board that is packed and waiting for the protagonist to hit the face with his supernatural powers. This ceiling is also waiting to be broken. And the one who broke the world's #1 ceiling in DC is none other than Lady Shiva's daughter Cassandra. Defeating Lady Shiva, and more than once, is basically the highlight of Cassandra's character, and it also established Cassandra's position as the new generation of the world's #1 martial arts master in the DC universe. Until the screenwriter of the Rebirth issue stabbed her in the back, and she was knocked down by Lady Shiva again, and she even gave Lady Shiva a line saying that "I had let you go before." But in the story of the same issue, Cassandra exploded again in the American comic style, and Lady Shiva killed her again, regaining her title of the best in the world. Such a little girl was able to surpass all the martial arts gods in DC and become the best in the world, and she also had her own way. After Batman investigated her life experience, he found that Cassandra's father David Kane had trained his daughter inhumanely since she was very young. The training content was mainly to specially train a new martial arts technique that had never been seen before and may never be seen again. It is said that it can only be practiced if it is practiced from a child who has not yet learned to speak. He taught Cassandra to read people's macro expressions and muscle reactions, to predict the opponent's moves, so she can see through the enemy's moves like telepathy, and anticipate the enemy's moves in advance. Therefore, any move of the enemy will be cracked and counter-attacked by her before she can make a move, making her invincible in martial arts. However, as the price of learning this move, she lost her ability to speak and can only communicate with others through gestures and drawings. Lali, silent, the strongest killer, naturally cute and super fighting. If it weren't for her pointed ears and bats on her chest, these elements would probably make people think that she is a beautiful girl with colorful hair in the Japanese two-dimensional film set. What makes Chu Cheng feel even more intimate is that this Lali is not only cute and good at fighting, but also the nationality of the character is Chinese. It can only be said that in the impression of American screenwriters, this kind of martial arts is bound to the East. Whenever they want to design a super powerful martial arts master, they can always be more or less related to the great Chinese. Her unique predictive fighting technique is also a bit coveted. It feels like it should be better than Captain America's. It would be great if this could also be used to draw equipment. But I don't know if it's because the new shower gel I changed after taking a shower today is more useful. Chu Cheng felt that he was lucky this time. He redeemed the remaining single draw ticket and got a new hero. And it was the serious psychic type he had been talking about all the way. Moonlight Knight. Chapter 74 Looking for Sandbags. Moon Knight, a Marvel superhero, is nicknamed Marvel Batman by many fans because of his gorgeous cape and highly recognizable crescent darts, and because he often likes to take on the work of the New York police to investigate and reason on the scene. Of course, although he only goes out at night like Batman, he is completely different from the old man in that he is dressed in white from head to toe, which is very eye-catching under the night and can be seen from a long distance. After all, whether it is an assassin or a thief wearing this death color in the middle of the night, it is difficult not to doubt whether this person is malicious and white, and Kid praised it. And although he is a street hero, Moon Knight is not immortal in the original setting of the comics and the TV version. He is an agent who has obtained the power of the moon god Khonsu in Egyptian mythology, and is the incarnation chosen by the moon god in the mortal world. So as an incarnation, he has the divine power blessed by the moon god. These include but are not limited to super strength, extraordinary physical fitness and endurance, super fast self-healing, and the ability to see various spirits that are invisible to the naked eye. According to the conventional settings, his ability will be enhanced with the moonlight, but in fact, his ability depends on the mood of the moon god. If the moon god is in a good mood, he can still do well in the daytime or in outer space. When he is in a good mood, even the first line heroes can't beat him. Even when the divine power is sufficient, the Moon Knight's resistance can be directly enhanced from super speed self-healing to immortality. In simple terms, he is just a worker, and he signed a contract to sell his body. The moon god Khonsu is not a good person either. In various Moon Knight stories, he always thinks about how to squeeze out the surplus value of his employees. He is an old capitalist. Chu Cheng gradually began to discover something. A common feature of American comic heroes is that their upper and lower limits are often very different. Let's take Batman as an example. When he was weak, he had a hard time fighting street thugs in the Earth 1 comics. When he was strong, he went around and ganked the god level boss alone when his teammates fought in a group. But his god-killing cheating level equipment has not been seen in the current Batcave arsenal. Some other heroes are similar. For example, the Moonlight Knight, who has just been released, is a typical example of the fluctuating strength in different periods. When Khonsu had enough divine power, he could single-handedly defeat the normal Avengers, but when he had a falling out with the capitalists and had no protection or buffs, he was also defeated by ordinary thugs. Chu Cheng observed that the strength of the characters he currently drew from the SEAL level hero pool is roughly within a limited range. They are neither at their worst period, nor at their peak. The same is true for Moonlight Knight. When a higher level hero pool is opened in the future, it may be possible to draw stronger plug-in forms of these heroes. Although this set of settings of the God's Agent can make Moonlight Knight a good product on the mass production line of superheroes, it is not his most eye-catching part. Compared with other heroes, the most interesting and special ability of Moonlight Knight is that he can play a landlord with himself and even play magic when he is in a good state, because he is a madman with dissociative identity disorder. The Moon Knight in the MCU TV series has 3 personalities. One is a veteran mercenary, one is a social worker in a museum gift shop, and the other is a hot-tempered driver who cuts people at the slightest disagreement. Each personality has his own soul and his own life. Several different personalities torture each other in one body to the point of battle, and even the split ethics of I cheat on myself. The baby is not born by me, but it is still my biologically is also a major attraction of the Moon Knight story. Of course, Chu Cheng cares more about actual compatibility than the personality setting. Then it's time for his favorite new hero test again, to see which unlucky little guys will be drawn as lucky sandbags tonight. The test is based on the order of shipment. Then you will be the first to be decided. Go ahead, Brother Tang. Not long after he went out, the exclamation mark appeared, and the sandbag he found was a street bag stealer. This kind of goal made him a little disappointed. To be honest, he was not even qualified to be a sandbag. But then he thought, this pickpocket is the kind who will catch someone by surprise and run away. Although he is not very good at fighting, he can run pretty fast. He can't be a sandbag, but he can be a target. So Chu Cheng controlled the green arrow to grab the high ground in advance, stepped on the balcony of an unmanned house on the street side, and aimed at the shadow running wildly on the sidewalk from a high position. Whoosh! An arrow broke through the air, and it was as accurate as if it had its own guidance and hit the bullseye. The bag thief who was running wildly suddenly felt a tightening in his back, followed by a piercing pain, and then he fell headfirst, letting out a series of shrill screams that made people feel painful just by listening. The passers-by around were frightened by the tragic scene of an arrow stuck in the bullseye and blood all over the ground. They all felt a chill in their backs, as if a cold wind blew. Some people with good eyesight even caught a glimpse of the archer. Although it was a dark and windy night and no one could see clearly, it was said that the archer hero was wearing a forgiveness hat and was extremely accurate in his shots. As God knows, Chu Cheng did not intend to harm Tang Jie's reputation. It's just that, although he has played a lot of archery in other games, this is his first time to touch a bow in this game, so he needs some adaptation. In fact, he originally wanted to aim at the leg. As the saying goes, people make mistakes and horses stumble. Chu is just a gamer, and not a real chewing gum ambassador. It's possible that this novice shot 1 or 2 arrows off the target. It's definitely not, because he has some strange bad taste. I feel that, if there are any special tasks in the future that require shooting arrows equipped with special arrowheads, or completing some fixed point sniping tasks, Tang Jie may have a role, but other than that, he has nothing to do. Apart from anything else, the Green Arrows family is the tyrant of Star City. They are not as rich as Wayne, but they are also very rich. They are the second generation of rich people who want to stuff money into the toilet paper roll. However, they go out to play all day and are reluctant to buy themselves a bulletproof vest. If you say that he is confident in his body movement and positioning, it is not impossible to put all the skill points into agility, but the problem is that he has been shot in the show, which is really embarrassing. Chu Cheng then replaced the team's only designated substitute police dog Daredevil. The Green Arrow's detection and perception range of events is too small and not sensitive enough. If you want to brush events faster and more efficiently, Lawyer Ma is the best choice. After replacing Lawyer Ma, the city suddenly became noisy. The seemingly calm city is actually undercurrents. There are conspiracies brewing every night and criminals waiting to be punished every day. All he needs is a pair of ears that are good at listening. For example, when Lawyer Ma passed by a rooftop on 32nd Street in Z District, an exclamation mark popped up immediately. Chu Cheng asked Lawyer Ma, to stop and listen carefully to the content of the exclamation mark. It was a conversation from deep underground in an alley, and only Lawyer Mark could hear it with his ability. It's that grocery store again. The store owner is Liu, remember? How long has he been in arrears with his protection fee? More than a month. TSK, I heard that guy seemed to have seen that light one night. Yes, you all know it. It's the light show with a bat on the clouds. Then he suddenly refused to cooperate, as if he thought that Batman taught them not to be afraid or something. It seems that someone needs to review the basic rules of this street. Let Abeo lead the team, and tell him that it doesn't matter if he loses an arm or a leg. I want to kill one to warn the rest. Okay. Chu Cheng narrowed his eyes. The sandbag was found. Chapter 75. Come back tomorrow. The first step is to fix the lighting equipment. This is also the experience that Batman has summed up after playing a lot. For heroes like them who sneak around and steal people, darkness is a good partner. Chu Cheng also cut off the light source before operating Tangjet to officially start, and the gangsters in the underground club were immediately in chaos. If this situation happened in the past, it would generally be regarded as a power outage, and at most they would curse and say that the power supply was becoming less and less reliable. But since a certain pointy-eared transvestite with a special effect of turning off the lights came out, the meaning of power outages and lights out has completely changed for criminals. It is said that in the early years, people often said that girls should learn to protect themselves when they go out, and then I don't know when it became that boys should also learn to protect themselves when they go out, and now it has become that gangsters should learn to protect themselves when they go out. You don't know whether this should be regarded as social progress or historical reversal. A bunch of big men on the street dared not walk at night. In the middle of the night, a bad street light flashed twice, which scared them half to death. Seeing a cat's pointed ears cast on the ground by the street light while rummaging in the trash can for midnight snacks would make them scream. Bats have PTSD, but this time they didn't meet Batman. Whoosh! The arrow flew through the air and suddenly pierced the body of a gangster who was looking around carefully under the cover of darkness. The man immediately let out a heart-wrenching scream, which frightened all the accomplices in the room. Yamada, is that you? Is it the Bat? Where is he? A group of people began to panic. Many people turned on the flashlights on their mobile phones, and beams of light swayed randomly in the darkness. Whoosh! Another sound of breaking through the air. The afterimage of the green arrow passed through the light path, and there was another scream, and a criminal fell down. Everyone was terrified. Someone near the door tried to escape, but after holding the handle and twisting it for a long time, the door panel was as stiff as if it was welded shut and didn't move at all. They were locked in their own club, together with a ghostly shooter. He was invisible, but omnipresent. Everyone present was his target. To be honest, although he didn't have high expectations for Tangjet at the beginning, Chu Cheng found it unexpectedly fun after getting started. Thinking carefully, after all, he had played melee units before, either Reckless or Tank, and this was the first time he played a serious shooter. In the past, he had always played with short arms against long arms, and the main idea was to study how to get close and sneak attack, and punch the opponent in the face without being shot. But today, he had a long arm, and the range became his advantage. The main idea changed from how to get close to how to seize the output space, relying on continuous movement, to pull the gun line to find the angle, and change positions after each shot. You can even play Green Arrow as a shooter. However, it is said that an archer who cannot fight in close combat is not a good warrior, and Brother Tang who does not go up to try his archery skills is soulless. After all the threatening units were knocked down, and Chu Cheng felt that he had almost had enough fun shooting arrows, he then controlled Green Arrow to jump down and directly jumped into the middle of the criminals. He's here. The criminal shouted halfway, and before he finished speaking, he was chopped off by Brother Tang's alloy compound bow. The people who had not been hit by the arrows were shocked and hurriedly surrounded him. Brother Tang was not as good as the monster level Shy and Bang masters such as Batman and the 3rd generation Batgirl, but he was at the master level anyway, and he was more than enough to bully the weak in the bronze and black iron levels. Some of the people were wielding knives, and some were holding the holy sword of physics, but none of them could beat the compound bow in Brother Tang's hand that was used as a close combat weapon. A group of men were beaten to pieces by a bow, some rolled on the ground, some groaned, and some performed opening their mouths and closing their eyes on the ground. Their big brother held his head and huddled behind his desk, seemingly praying that Robin Hood didn't notice him. But it seems that God is fair after all, because this man is ugly, but he has beautiful thoughts. After finishing his work, Green Arrow walked through the henchmen lying all over the floor and pulled the club's big brother out from behind the desk. "You have failed this city." Green Arrow stepped on him and said the iconic line. Of course, this sentence was not said by Chu Cheng, but by the character's own voice. The big brother was shaking like a sieve and hurriedly begged for mercy. "Wait. Misunderstanding. It's all misunderstanding. I'm a serious businessman, doing some small business honestly, and I have never done anything illegal. Hero, you must have made a mistake." Green Arrow stabbed an arrow into his knee without saying a word, and the big brother turned pale in pain. Hero, calm down." The eldest brother begged for mercy with sweat all over his forehead. "No matter what rumors you heard, they are all rumors. There is no basis, no evidence. You can't. The sheriff needs evidence." Green Arrow made a cold voice with voice change under the shadow of the hood. "Do you think I look like a sheriff?" The eldest brother choked instantly. The huge fear dominated him again. Yes, this is what scares them the most. Whether it is the sheriff or the court, they have to follow the rules. And those of them who are mixed in the underworld have naturally figured out the rules after a long time. They can take advantage of loopholes, find someone to blame, bribe witnesses, cover up evidence, and use all kinds of means to make the rules helpless against them. But these crazy people in strange costumes don't play by the rules. Just like the cuckold in front of him. Maybe he really has no evidence. Maybe he doesn't even know what their club has done. Maybe he just happened to pass by and suddenly wanted to find a target to practice archery, and they couldn't do anything to him. "Your gang, other strongholds." The cuckolded man spoke again. His voice was depressing. "I want the address." After so many days of vigilante activities, although Chu Cheng only had a partial understanding, he had some idea of the distribution of power in the underground world of this city. He roughly knew which gangs lived in each area. Generally, the strongholds in an area belonged to specific gangs. They would not invade other people's territory with their own property, which would be regarded as a provocation. These were things that ordinary citizens were unlikely to know. So when he found such a stronghold on the street, Chu Cheng could probably guess which family it belonged to. It was very satisfying to beat up such a group of people, but Chu Cheng still felt that it was not very satisfying. It felt that these men looked like they were tall and strong, but they were like paper when they fought, highlighting the idea of "you lie down before I even exerted any strength," which was boring. Moreover, he had only tested Tang Jian, and there were 2 new heroes waiting in line for testing. With this number of people, there was not enough to fight. So he had to continue looking for new sandbags. But wandering around the streets waiting for the target to appear was too slow. So he thought about it and thought it would be better to ask for a few more addresses from people and go to challenge and search the houses one by one. When the eldest brother heard this, his face turned green, and he hurriedly said, "We are all in charge of our own organizations. I don't know the location of other bases." Green Arrow pulled out the arrow from his wound and then inserted it again. "Wrong answer." Green Arrow said, "Think about it again." The eldest brother was in so much pain that the tough guy cried and closed his eyes in despair. Finally, he gave up struggling under fear and severe pain and confessed the address. He guessed that this madman would definitely knock on the door one by one according to the address. After today, the brothers in the organization will know that he led the devils there, and they will definitely cut him into pieces. But when the cuckolded madman let him go and seemed to be finally ready to leave, he still breathed a sigh of relief. Anyway, tonight's nightmare is finally over. But before he could catch his breath, he saw the cuckolded madman suddenly stopped halfway and turned his head. By the way, he turned his head and said, as if he remembered something, "Call more people tomorrow. I'll come again tomorrow." The eldest brother's expression froze instantly. 3 updates today. The countdown to the release is in the last few days, and the explosive update is brewing. Continue to pre-order the first order. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.